Thanks for tuning in, guys. You're listening to Ace Comicals. I'm Greg Driver. I'm joined by Rahul, Johnny, and Leon Everett. Let's go! Hi guys, welcome to episode number 51 of Ace Comicals. Today we are here to talk to you about the latest Spider-Man movie to hit the cinema. This little animated thing called Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse. I guess you guys might have heard of it. I don't know. It's not that big. So today I am joined by my usual co-hosts that are Ray.
Hey dude.
Leon.
Hello.
And web swinging in to join us, we have a special guest, Marv.
Hi guys.
Now, we've mentioned Marv before on the cast. He's a mutual friend of the three of us. And I guess we know him through our shared interests and having attended conventions together and such like. And, Marv, tell us a bit about yourself.
I'm a big fan of comics. Been an avid comic reader as a kid. Got into it, in a big way in the 90s. Kind of fell off a bit and, had a big sort of, renaissance. But then, stopped for a while, and the podcast actually helped me get back into comics more recently. So thanks for that, guys.
Wow, we have a fan.
Yeah, the podcast was all just an elaborate thing, purely just to get you back on the train.
Yeah, that's all it was for. Yeah, the machinations of getting Marv back into comics.
Long con intervention.
Yeah, it was all the long game.
So, Marv, welcome to Ace Comicals.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, obviously, the big order of the day today will be to discuss the new Into the Spider-Verse movie, which it's a really fun animated feature that is out of the cinemas at the moment for you to go and watch. But before we get into that, I just want to go through what we've been doing since the previous recording, as is the usual kind of ritual with Ace Comicals now, where we just sort of like talk about everything but what we're meant to talk about until we get to a point where we have to talk about it. So, guys, what have we been up to between times, and who wants to kick us off with that?
Nobody.
I didn't want to jump the gun.
That's cool. I'm looking at the calendar trying to think of what I've done, and like these fortnights go by in a blur. Like, apart from Spider-Man, which I think was the thing that I was the most excited about over the last 2 weeks, I don't know, I've had a bunch of Christmas parties. I've had like 3 work Christmas parties in a row. We had a launch party for a game at the company I work for. We did my department's Christmas party, which was we all went to play shuffleboard, which is like the most hipstery thing that could have been found to do in London for an hour, and then had some like kind of crappy pizzas from the same venue. But you know,
that's saying something, because there's places in London where you can pay 20 quid to have a nap. So
what? Really?
Yeah. I read something a long time ago about well, I say a long time ago, I think it was earlier this year, about a place in Shoreditch where you can pay 20 quid to sleep in a tent.
Yeah, it's totally legit.
That's ridiculous. So we didn't do that. I think we played shuffleboard, which was kind of like, it's bowling with a stick. But I love the terms in it, because like the puck that you push around is called a biscuit, and the stick you use is called a tang. So like pushing your biscuits around with your tang is great. It was actually a lot of fun, and it's really good to do when you're a little bit tipsy, because like, I don't know, I feel like it's like bowling but with less chance of crushing somebody with like a really heavy ball. And then apart from that, we had our actual annual Christmas party, and that was fun. Loads of really cool like R&B music. I was complaining to Marvyn Lafayette about this the other day, about how they played some really good 90s R&B and nobody was dancing except for me. So we're gonna have to find like a 90s cheese R&B night to do one day before, I don't know, before New Year's 2020. Like we'll find space in a year to do it.
When you talk about that, the game that you were playing, this shuffleboard game, whatever it's called, it sounds like you were actually
shuffleboard.
I don't know.
Sorry,
sounds like you were tricked into being an extra in Basketball. A Basketball remake.
It's that thing that you see on like cruise ships, I believe. Like, I don't know. It was surprisingly fun. I'm not going to knock it too much. It was a good way to kill an hour. But,
yeah.
Like, as with anything London related, it was very expensive for just what it was. But you know, company paid for it. It was all good.
Yeah. I guess I've been like, because I'm leaving the country over Christmas, so I've been like, in the ramp up to that, I've been super busy and stretched super thin. Like, the stuff I like, the amount of things I've managed to cram in. I've done my best Arnold Schwarzenegger Jingle All the Way impression and finished my Christmas shopping. I've had 2 Christmases already at this point of recording, and have another one planned before I leave the country to go for the final boss Christmas in Hungary.
How many secret families do you have?
Well, look, right, I've had Christmas with my mum on Thursday. We went and had a roast dinner and exchanged gifts. My dad came round Friday night and we exchanged gifts, so I had Dad Christmas on Friday night.
Okay.
On Tuesday night, it's traditional Christmas with the boys, which usually happens on Christmas Eve, where I go to, I mean, even though we've all got our own places now, we still go to my mate's grandma's house and she lets us.
Oh, okay.
And we have like Christmas in her back room, and we just buy her a bottle of sherry for letting us party there. And we have like a massive game of Mario Party and get takeout and have a few drinks and exchange gifts. And we've been doing that for over 10 years now. In the same place. Really nice. Yeah. We have like these huge like 50-turn games of Mario Party and then crown a champion every year.
That doesn't sound nice.
No one's died yet, so
remarkably.
Yeah. no one's there's never any violence or anything like that, because it's just how it goes. Oh, and we have set characters we play as, and if you try and play as someone else's character, then like that's what starts the arguments, not the stealing of stars and coins, because that's just a given. It's like, if I walked in and found someone else playing as Luigi, I would not be happy. Luigi's mine. But yeah, so Mario Party and stuff, and that happens Tuesday night, and then me and Sophie fly out to go see her family over Christmas in Hungary, and then we're coming back here in time for New Year. So it's busy. And in between that, I've managed to play a lot of Smash Bros. I've managed to read a fair few comics, as usual, because that's kind of what I do. That's like my off switch. And also, my mum got me for Christmas, you know, the Batman animated series has recently been like remastered and re-released in a Blu-ray box set, like the whole thing. So New Batman Adventures and stuff, like all of it together in one box set. And it's been remastered beautifully, and I've watched a bit of that this morning and last night, and let me tell you, it's like watching it for the first time again. Like, honestly, it's so beautiful and so beautifully done. Like, you just get a real sense of the kind of work that went into that show, and the beauty of the animation is just like, And, like, I should explain that this is the 90s Batman cartoon, Batman the Animated Series. Which was like the Paul Dini and Bruce Timm cartoon, which gave us Harley Quinn. So yeah, that's really cool, and it's a really cool box set. It's a really nice. It looks like a book, and then you open it and you flip through, and there's like different Blu-rays. Like each disc is on its own page, kind of thing, and it's just really, really nicely presented, and it's really great to watch, and really nice to see. It's so clean and so lovingly restored. It's great.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pick that up.
I want them to do Animaniacs next.
Yes. Animaniacs would be so good.
Give me an Animaniacs one. And a bonus Freakazoid disc with that, please. Yeah. Because that was like, those were the, like, you know, Animaniacs, Freakazoid, and Batman. So, Leon, you been up to much?
So, yeah, I wasn't on the last episode, as avid listeners will recall. So yeah, in that time, I guess I've done a lot of stuff, but you know how work is, like, your week just flies by really quickly. So in that time, I've been to more gigs than I had gone to last recording. So I'd seen, with Rahul, I saw, Lauryn Hill play the O2. And earlier this week I saw, Pusha T. And those are, quite, enjoyable gigs, quite interesting. Like presentations of the songs, and yeah, just generally a good time. I've also, last weekend, I was in Bristol and decided to watch the Dark Knight trilogy, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy again. I guess it's like a good time to do it, with it being like 10 years since The Dark Knight. And as I've mentioned before on the cast, The Dark Knight is up there as my like favorite, not just comic book or like not just superhero character, but like comic book like film. And not to like dig into it or relitigate, as we spoke about it earlier in the year, but I think what was really interesting on this watch was just how what I think is really effective about those movies is, and in more ways, like in different ways in each film, but particularly in The Dark Knight, is that it manages to make itself quite a definitive cinematic portrayal without it having to be like the definitive portrayal. Because the way I look at it, it is like a really good adaptation in terms of bringing the comic into more or less the real world. And it, in many ways, it's not faithful to like the books, that they adapt storylines, but it's trying to do its own thing. And I think that's what makes it most effective, and that's what makes it like the classic it is, without me having to say, but I like this Joker and da-da-da-da. And I think, as we'll probably speak about more later, I think that is a great direction to go when adapting properties with like so much history, like decades and decades and decades of continuity and different writers and artists coming through. And I think that trilogy of movies set out to do something very particular and nail them. So yeah, that was fun, and I'd highly recommend people go back and revisit those. And also, as Greg alluded to earlier, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate came out on the Switch last Friday, and yeah, we've been roasting it. I haven't been able to play it as much as I wanted to due to just various things, but in playing it, it's been really fun, because the Smash Brothers IP, like the first game on the N64 came out in the late 90s, so it's been near 2 decades of playing those games. And while they do update characters and obviously add new levels and new mechanics and everything else, one of the things that's remarkable is that it does have this nice feeling when you start playing of, oh yeah, I remember this place. I have vague memories of this. This feels familiar. It's slightly different, but it's home. And that's what I've been enjoying going back. And like, I've never been like the biggest Nintendo fanboy, but Smash Brothers makes you one. Just like the level of love and care, and the devil in the details in those games. And this one has the most details, like ever for any of the games. So,
yeah. I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you there as well, actually, because I've just interrupted you without wanting to. But what I find most interesting about this version of Smash Bros, this edition, is the fact that up until now, Smash Bros has been a celebration and a collection of other IPs, and not an IP in its own right. And now it kind of has its own mythology tied to it. Yeah.
Which is it's quite funny, because we were speaking about this the other day. There's like a in the menus you can like play all the sound effects, but you can also play all the songs. And for all the different IPs brought in, there's like songs in there. I think in total there's like near 800 songs. But I found myself not going to like the Zelda or Mario or Mario Kart or even Fire Emblem tracks. Instead, I went to the Smash Brothers symbol and was re-listening to the remixed and old versions of the menu music. And like, it's so weird how, in that way, it's become its own thing. And obviously now with the World of Light mode, and all the various extras, it is a thing unto itself, as well as being this sort of jamboree of characters coming together.
And it's like it's made itself its own thing whilst also still being a jamboree. Because when you go to World of Light mode, it looks like a Final Fantasy game cover.
Yeah, and like the update thing,
yeah,
the spirit thing, and all that looks like the sphere grid from Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, and it's just so, but it's like it's its own thing now, and I like it. It's a nice touch at how it tells its own story. Like Smash Bros tells its own story via that mode and via like the way the game is set up, because when you start the game, you only get the original characters that are playable in the Nintendo 64 game, and from then onwards you unlock the rest. So it kind of tells its own story of how Smash Bros grew into what it is now. Which is
yeah.
The meta game.
Yeah. Marv, you want to give us a little bit of background about like kind of what kind of stuff you like doing in your spare time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an avid gamer. I've got a backlog that we don't speak about, but I try and play as much new stuff as I do stuff that I have to catch up on. But as much as I like doing that, I probably read books equally. So I do sort of love finding new books, finding stuff that appeals to me, because I like horror and sort of sci-fi fantasy more than anything else. But Leon has got me a couple of books that are sort of almost not outside my comfort zone, but the sort of things that I wouldn't normally buy myself that I've ended up enjoying. So yeah, it would be those things really. I've recently gotten into buying and making models, which I'm hoping won't become an obsession. I got myself a Metal Gear Rex figure. I've had an Anubis figure from Zone of the Enders for ages, and very recently I got myself Guyver and Guyver 3 from the Guyver animated, anime.
Nice.
And a Final Form Sora as well, so they're all sort of taking pride of place.
Nice. Yeah, modelling is an expensive obsession.
Yes.
So, I know from the days, I mean, like, I've dabbled. I used to buy Gundam kits occasionally. Like, when I went to conventions, I used to come away with a Gundam kit, like, as a thing, and then go home and build it. But yeah, they're expensive. I've recently started stocking them at my local Forbidden Planet, and I'm reminded about how expensive they are, because, like, just looking at the prices on them, it's just scary. But yeah, it's a cool thing to do, to sit and build a model, and there's a sense of achievement at the end when you've done it.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh, and in regards to because all three of you have sort of spoken about things that you've either gotten back into or rewatched recently, with obviously with yourself in the animated series, Leon going back and watching the Dark Knight trilogy, and even with Rahul talking about Smash Brothers and how the lore sort of becomes its own thing. I've been spending a lot of time, because I've been working a lot, but in the in-between parts, I've been trying to sort of get all my Christmas presents wrapped before the big day, and I tried to get a huge swath of them done at once and put V for Vendetta on, because I bought the movie and the graphic novel, having read them and watched them already, but not owned them. So I rewatched V for Vendetta for the first time in ages, and was sort of struck by how it still has the power to move me, even though I've watched it so many times before. It's weird watching it in 2018 and sort of seeing how relevant the themes that it brings up become more and more as each year passes. Some of the montages that you have with the people that have been persecuted, with the way that the government's sort of cracking down on things. And this probably refers more to America than to us here in the UK, but it's sort of one of those scary cautionary tales that sort of really does have a resonance. It brought a tear to my eye by the end of it. And rewatched Watchmen as well on the same day, and sort of had a renewed appreciation for how faithful the sort of panel to screen work that Zack Snyder did on that movie was, even though it's not a perfect movie, but it's a very good comic book movie visually, definitely. I'd say that. Definitely.
Speaking of comic book movies, I guess it's time we got onto the main event, the main subject of this podcast, which was the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie that has recently hit cinemas. And we've all been out to watch it, and we've come here to review it for you. And is quite a thing, isn't it? It's quite a movie.
Definitely.
It's not bad.
It's not bad at all, no.
It's okay. It's a good sit.
Yes,
It's a good way to kill a couple of hours.
It's a good sit down. I mean, you saw it in 4DX or whatever it's called, didn't you, Leon? So I guess you could talk about that soon.
Yes, you'll hear the trials and tribulations of my ordeal.
I'm gonna kick this off with our individual cinema experiences, which seems to be a thing on this podcast as well. If you've heard us talk about movies before, we like to complain about other people watching films. So I'll kick us off by saying that I went yesterday morning at like 11:05 to like the first viewing, and I got there and I was the first. I must have been the first person to buy a ticket because I got there and they offered me like the seats and I could choose any seat and I was like, oh, okay. So I picked my seat, dead smack in the middle, right in front, like right dead center and everything. Went and got my drink and I went into the screen and I sat down and there was no one else in there. And for like a brief 10 minutes, I thought, I'm going to be the only person in here. This is great. I'm going to have the whole screen to myself. How wrong I was. So like, I mean, obviously, it's a film. This film, it's an animated feature. It's aimed at children, right? Or in some ways, it's aimed at children, and families started to come in as the trailers were going and things like that. And I mean, the screen didn't fill up completely, but by the time the film started, there was a lot of kids in there, and there was some. They were all enjoying it and everything else, and they were all very well behaved. But there was probably a couple of kids in there that were probably too young because they couldn't sit still, and even though, the parents were like pleading with them to try and be quiet, and they just wouldn't be quiet. They were like shouting in the middle of the film and things like that, and they just wouldn't adhere to cinema rules or etiquette, which I can understand because it's, a long time to sit still, even for me as an adult, and these kids must have been younger than 5. And I just, I don't think it was a good idea for anyone to have brought them into that, really, because I don't think any kid under 5 would have really appreciated or understood the film anyway. In places, I think it's probably a little bit too much for a kid that age. I don't know about you guys, but also the fact that they, it kind of spoiled it for everyone else because these kids were just like running around in the cinema screen and things and just wouldn't, like, the parents were like trying to keep them under control, and it just wasn't working too well.
11 a.m. on a Saturday is my worst nightmare, and you lived it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is on you for picking the time of day and time of the week that parents take their kids to see movies, which is fair enough because like either you do this in the morning or you go in the evening and you're surrounded by douchebag adults. So like you can't win anyway, Greg. You're going to have a story to tell regardless. Or
teenagers, which I have less sympathy for. Completely less sympathy for. I hate going into cinema screens full of teenagers. If you're 15, don't go and watch a film. Don't.
But of course, if you are 15, please do continue to listen to this podcast.
Yeah. I'm joking, by the way. It's a free country. I'm not generalissimo Rahul with his strict cinema rules.
Even I wouldn't go this far. People are allowed to see movies. Just don't do it when I want to see movies. That's all I ask.
Yeah.
15-year-olds aren't in the cinema. They're in the queue in Fortnite waiting for the next match. Let's be honest.
Watching the film on their little phone in between, like they've downloaded a cam of it and they're watching it on their like Samsung phone screen while they're waiting for the match to start on Fortnite.
10-minute bursts of movie.
Yeah.
That is
too real.
That's disgusting.
I've got your number, Gen Z. I've got your number. So yeah, but yeah, that was my cinema experience. So it was great, apart from the fact that I think those kids were probably a little bit too young to be in that film, and thus started acting up halfway through, and that's not their fault. But kind of spoiled it for a lot of other people that were in there. I think, because there was like for those two kids, there was like every like all these like well-behaved kids in there, and other people like people for like all ages in there, like wanting to watch the film, like other adults and such forth. So, but yeah, it was great. Other than that, it was a good cinema experience. How did you get on at the cinema, Ray? What was it like for you?
Well, my first experience was seeing it with Leon and Marv. Like, we all went together. That was our first time all watching the movie, right? You guys didn't see it before that, did you?
No, that was my first time as well.
Yeah, like, I don't think there was anything of note at that screening. I think we got very good seats. It was quite a respectable audience. There were some people who came in quite late behind us, if I don't...
Oh, God, yeah. They had no qualms about kneeing the seats as they were trying to walk past everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, like 5 minutes into the movie starting, right? Which is thankfully it was behind us and they weren't blocking the screen in front of us.
Yeah, true. There was that hilarious moment where there's an emotional and poignant scene happening in the movie, and everything goes quiet, and someone right behind us drops like a full bag of popcorn.
Yeah, like if the characters on screen had dropped whatever they were holding, the person behind us dropped their entire bag of popcorn. It was really funny. There was a woman sat next to me who I'm pretty sure was there just because her boyfriend wanted to be there. And she looked miserable. She looked really grumpy. She was talking to him throughout the entire thing. Luckily, it was one of those movies where it's loud enough, impactful enough, and like there's something always going on that I was more distracted by the screen than the people talking nearby me. And it wasn't a constant thing. But like, even you were saying the people behind us, if they were doing slight banter or like making a little bit of noise behind us, I think the film was engaging enough that you could actually ignore the crap happening in the screen around you.
Yeah, it's the kind of movie where, and I mean ourselves included, there's funny stuff happening all the time or exciting stuff happening, and so, the odd whoa or, everyone laughing together is part of the cinema experience rather than it being people chatting or looking on their phones and completely detracting from the movie.
Yeah, because there was a moment where you did it, and like, Generalissimo Rahul would have been really mad at you because you turned over to me and said, "Did you see it?" And I was like, "What? Did you see it? Did you see the suit?" I was like, "Yes, I saw the suit, Marvin. Now watch."
Well, I knew that, like, of the three of us that were sitting there, you had played the game as recently as I had, so I was like, "Oh my God, did anyone else notice? It's the one from the PS4 game."
Yes, I noticed, Marvin. I noticed.
It makes me very happy that you did.
Oh.
Did you see it? How could I miss it? I'm sat in a dark room with a massive screen in front of me.
The logo's white, Marvin. Of course I saw it.
So like, was this woman who was like really didn't want to be there? Was she like berating him for his film choice the whole time, or what?
I think she just looked really grumpy. Like when I sat down next to her, and she just, I don't know, she had an air of like, I'm enduring this, but I'm going to be vocal about how much I'm enduring this because I'm going to use it as like a trump card later in our relationship. It genuinely felt like that. I could feel that heat coming off them. Where I'm kind of annoyed that I wasn't sat next to him because he looked like he was really into it, but I had to be sat next to the lady who was, I don't know, just outward about her disdain for being brought into this.
Do you know what I'm finding as kind of like a general rule when you like ask people about this film? People that get really excited about other Marvel films and the MCU and Marvel properties and things like that are kind of like point blank not wanting to watch this.
I got a semi-sense of that. I think, because I know people who are huge into the MCU, like the live-action ones.
Yeah.
And they were like so-so on this.
You mention this and they just go,
No, because I've had a conversation with somebody, like I was at the hairdresser the other day, and he's like, "Oh, is that meant to be good? It's a cartoon, right?" And I was like, "It depends on how your initial feelings are towards animated movies in general, I guess." And I think there is a stigma about a lot of animated movies are either super raunchy or they're super childish, and like even the stuff that is kind of grown up themes or whatever, like. It's not a Pixar movie where it's trying to tell an adult story using, I don't know, child-friendly aesthetics or... I don't know, I feel like this fits into a weird place, and especially because the aesthetics are so different to what you expect, and because it wears its comic book origins on its sleeves so readily, I think that can put off a lot of people who would normally be okay with watching, the Pixar or DreamWorks movies of the day, but bristle at the idea that there's something that's like trying to translate comic to screen, like panel to screen, as Marvyn said. Yeah, it's a shame, but I think people will be pleasantly surprised if they give it a chance.
It's weird that, like I said, these people will go and watch comic book movies and things, and they'll be well into the MCU and everything else, and they'll go and watch things like Toy Story and things like that, but all of a sudden this is a cartoon, and that's what's putting them off.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think some of it comes down to marketing and how like the MCU has done over a decade's worth of like building goodwill and making making geek cool again. I don't know. I feel like this appeals to a different sensibility, especially in the marketing. Like, because this is probably a good place to start. Like, how did you feel about the trailer when that first came out a year ago?
I was on board with that. I liked it. I was on board with all of that. Like, like the whole lead up to this, the trailer and everything else. I was excited to see it and to see what they were doing with Spider-Man.
How about you, Marv? When did you first see the trailer?
I mean, I remember seeing like the teaser trailer when it first came out. I think it might even have been one of either you or Leon who linked it to me, and getting really excited about it because, I mean, as I'll go into later in the conversation, I had always been interested in, Miles Morales as a character, his run on Spider-Man, and had never really gotten into it. So to see that he was getting his own movie, that's kind of how the first teaser seemed. It seemed like the Miles Morales movie featuring other Spider-Men. Really excited me. So I was really, sort of happy to see that. And it's a good trailer, the music that they used for that trailer and the later ones as well. It was really engaging. It's just a shame that, up until sort of what felt like 2 weeks before the movie, you didn't really see it much anywhere. It wasn't being pushed. It's only like just before the movie was released that you started to see it come up on sort of YouTube ads and, recommendations on IMDb and stuff like that.
Leon, sort of like what was it like your sort of like when you first started hearing whispers of this film and whatever, like how did you feel about that?
Yeah, so this goes back a bit. So when, not long after Homecoming was announced and all those deals went through and we're like, yay, Spider-Man's in the MCU. At the same time, Sony, announced that they were doing like an animated Spider-Man. And I was like, okay, that'll be interesting. I wonder, what they're going to do. And then I think not long after it was announced that, Lord and Miller were producing it. And so obviously, I'm a big fan of these guys, 21, 22 Jump Street, Lego Movie, their past forays into like TV and animation, the Meatballs films. Like, I'm a big fan of these guys because I feel they have not even the Midas touch, cause it's stronger than the Midas touch, cause the Midas touch, just turns stuff to gold. They are able to pick up like possible turd ideas and then turn those into diamonds. So like, I was immediately excited. And then not long after that, it was confirmed that this is not the story about Peter Parker. This is going to be about Miles Morales. And I was like, okay, this is on the radar. This is definitely on the radar. I look forward to hearing more about it. And then obviously the summer happened. That year we had those 3 Marvel movies, we had Homecoming, and it was nice to see Peter Parker back on my screen, especially in high school, and in a Queens that looks like Queens. So all that was really, really cool. And then, like in, December, I think it was the 9th of December, the first like teaser trailer drops, last year. And I remember being blown away because I was like, one, it uses this, parts of this Vince Staples track called Home. And the way that melody begins, it's like, it pulls you into this world effectively. And then just the visuals were like stuff I'd never seen. And come on, like, we're media culture people. I've seen a lot of different stuff. Like, I've seen a lot of different, like, short experimental, like, animations and stuff and everything. But the animation style for this and the way it was cutting back, with, like, frames of comic book, and it was just so colorful and vibrant and, kinetic. I mean, these are all cliche words, but that's what was displayed in that first teaser trailer. And I remember just watching it thinking like, okay. And at the time it said like Christmas 2018. And then I think a few weeks later they announced the actual date. And then we have like, this is some inside baseball for this, here. We have like a Google Calendar between us called releases. And, I think it was late December or early January that the actual date came up, and I immediately sipped all the way to December and added it to the releases calendar. And I was like, okay. And we wait. But it was weird because I think like the regular places, like your Slash Films and your sort of general movie places, were sharing it about, but there wasn't that much talking about it at all in ether until the second like actual trailer, which is the one that dropped in June, on the 6th of June earlier this year. I feel like that's when it was in the zeitgeist and everybody was like, whoa, what is this? I want to see this. I want to see this. I want to see this. And it was good timing as well because it had dropped like after Infinity War. So people had to deal with the way that movie ends. And then suddenly it's like, boom, you've got this like fun looking trailer, and it's completely different from everything else we've seen before. And so like I think like I've just been riding on and off a year's worth of hype of this movie. So it was scary because in the last couple of weeks when the reviews embargo lifted and it was universally being praised, I was like, oh no, I'm scared now. Because often when it's universal praise, I'm not like a contrarian or anything, but every now and again it'll be like, it's not going to touch me in the same way, is it? It's not going to touch me in the same way. I'm not going to feel what everyone else is feeling. And I was scared. Like, luckily going into it, my fears were avoided.
Yeah, I remember going into the calendar to try and put that on the releases thing as well, and being like slightly annoyed, but also pleasantly surprised that you'd got there before me. and the thing about the June trailer, like it takes a lot for me to like. I like rewatching trailers, like when the Last Jedi one came out, like all these other really amazing trailers. I watch them over and over again, but it takes a lot for me to go through them frame by frame, and I did that a lot with the Into the Spider-Verse trailer because there's so many things where it's like there's a splash of color on impacts, or there's like I don't know, just the way that he. I don't know, there's the bright, vibrant colours, and like every single frame is a fucking masterpiece in that trailer. And then that expands out into the entire film as well. Like, I just can't believe how much effort and energy and artistry went into like every single frame. It's beautiful. And that trailer got me so hyped for this film.
Yeah, I think that's where my initial hype started to actually like take hold and like get a proper foot in, was that first trailer. And also knowing that it was going to be not another Peter Parker story.
Yeah. Because
like, so many Peter Parker stories now. So many films about Peter Parker. I mean, and getting a story that was going to be about Miles Morales, who is, I think, should be probably the main Spider-Man now. I think we should probably like start to push Peter Parker. I mean, yes, Peter Parker is the first Spider-Man, will always be Spider-Man to a lot of people. I think Peter Parker should be starting to take a backseat more and more, which I think this movie kind of handles nicely, but and I'll get onto that later, but like he should be like, we should be starting to give the limelight to other characters now. And I think that's what this film, that's the point this film was trying to make as well, which I really liked. And yeah, it was just cool just to know that was coming up and everything else. So going into it, I think we were all excited for the fact that this wasn't going to be another Peter Parker story. And yeah, it was just something else. When I actually got to the cinema and watched it, like it was just so, I don't know how to put it into words.
Well, shall we start actually talking about non-spoilery movies? Like, should we go into the movie now? Because one of the things I wanted to just delineate between the spoiler section and the non-spoiler section is, let's talk about things in the non-spoiler section that are clear from the trailer. So the fact that it's beyond just Peter Parker and Miles Morales. There are other Spider people. There are other Spideys in this movie. Let's talk about that as though it's not a spoiler.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I wanted to bring up, and if it's okay for me to like dive right in, unless anyone has any other preamble they want to bring up.
Well, I mean, before we go too deep into the movie, I just kind of was going to talk about sort of my history with Spider-Man before sort of Spider-Verse, and a little bit about sort of the kind of comics that I used to read.
Yeah,
yes,
of course,
Marv.
go ahead.
The main reason you're here. In fact, you're a Spider-Man fan, so go for it.
Because again, I've caught up with the podcast recently, sort of blitzed through a fair few episodes because I didn't have the chance before. And it's funny listening to all of you talk about your history with comics and the kind of comics that you read, and sort of the themes that run through the kind of comics that you read. Because I hear a lot of myself in it. I kind of throughout the episodes have sort of seen a theme whereby, Rahul's comics will sort of more or less, and there's exceptions to every rule, obviously, I'm not pigeonholing anyone. Rahul will deal with sort of mental health and emotional well-being in a lot of the comics that he talks about. Leon tends to talk about sort of social issues and intersectionality. And, Greg is, eldritch horror and heavy metal album covers.
Shit, he's onto us.
But, a lot of where you guys started with comics mirrors a lot of, where I did, because, as a kid, I had two main entry points to comics. The first was Sonic the Comic, because I came into comics from Sonic as a game. Started buying Sonic the Comic, and that sort of, I think it's a good, or was, because obviously you can't really do it now, but it was a good launching point into buying comics, week by week, following storylines, and then having a main storyline that branches off into sort of side characters and sort of having issues that were dealing with side characters and stuff like that. So that sort of prepped me for when I got into sort of Batman, Spider-Man, things like that.
Oh, wow. The Ace Comicals origin comic has just been retconned because we've got another Sonic comic to add to it. Another fan of Sonic the Comic.
Yep, it's the nexus of all things.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
unfortunately.
One day we're gonna have to do a show about it.
That will require us having to reread Sonic the Comic, and I don't know if I want to do that.
I think I've got enough stories just from memory. I mean, I remember like me and Leon being kids, because I know we mentioned that we all knew each other beforehand, but I'm actually Leon's cousin. So, from way back when we were kids.
Wait, what? What?
Did they not tell you?
Bombshell.
What? This is the non-spoiler section, Mark.
Yeah, that's like the full page splash at the end. So that's the end of Ace Comicals episode 51. You're gonna have to wait.
Was that supposed to be the cliffhanger?
Yeah.
But no, we used to be sort of at each other's houses all the time, and we would miss issues, and so we would, I always remember Leon had, I think it was issue 8 of Sonic the Comic, where it goes back and tells you his origin when he was brown, and Dr. Robotnik was Dr. Kintober before the accident, and then there was a treadmill explosion that turned him into Dr. Robotnik, and Sonic got his blue spikes. But it was the first comic that I ever actively mailed in to get back issues for and things like that. So I properly dived into the the minutia of buying and collecting comics through Sonic the Comic. But the other sort of entry point was the cartoons. So, Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man, and the X-Men cartoons. And while I was getting into those and sort of, as you guys have said, they go into some of the more famous comic book arcs and do them in a way that is very well presented on screen. My dad noticed that I was really getting into them, and so he gave me a bunch of his old comics and some of his newer ones as well, because that was during the 90s that I was watching those. And I remember while watching Batman the Animated Series, before it had even finished, he gave me all of Nightfall. So I read all of Nightfall and Night's End before they covered Bane in the animated series.
Oh.
He gave me what he had of the Phoenix Saga before I bought the trade paperback later on. And yeah, that was when I started getting into sort of the big two, Marvel and DC, because after that I started to buy my own Spider-Man and Batman comics. Yeah, and I mean after that that was the dry patch, because I had a big bunch of that and sort of gotten into what my dad gave me. He gave me Batman Venom, which is where you get the origin of the drug that Bane uses. Some Iron Fist comics from the 70s, some original Iron Fist and Power Man comics. But the next stage for me after a fair few years was when Leon started getting into Y the Last Man, 100 Bullets, and Scott Pilgrim, and he would sort of lend those to me and get me into that. So that was when I sort of picked up again, got my second wind. And I had tried to make my way through a lot of those, and some of the other things that you recommended to me. I bought myself the Max, and lent it to Leon at one point as well, because I really loved Liquid Television on MTV and Aeon Flux, the Max, the Head. And it's only recently, because again, I dipped off again, that I listened to the podcast and sort of got myself a Comixology account and sort of caught up on the backlog of all the things that you guys have recommended, as well as a lot of things that I hadn't finished from back then. So that's sort of that in a nutshell. And
that brings us up to present day, where you're a massive Spider-Man fan now again, and you've been reading a lot of Spider-Man books.
Oh yes.
In preparation for this episode. Which I'm actually intimidated by, because I didn't read anything before going into this movie. Like, I didn't do any background at all. I just went straight in. And this is like, knowing what I know from osmosis and having read Spider-Man comics and things like that, like going into this, like knowing about certain characters that appear in the show. Because, I mean, we already know, like Ray has mentioned before, like it's not a spoiler. There are other Spider-Man characters in this film, other spiders from other alternate realities and other comics and things like that presented in a way. And, like, knowing who these characters are and about them just via osmosis and just from being a comics fan, that was like what I knew going in. But Marv did some extensive research.
Yeah, I kind of sort of picked and chose what I wanted to read before, because the three books that I really sort of dived into in preparation for the movie were Spider-Man Noir, the first run, because I know there's a sequel run that they did, but I haven't gotten around to reading that yet. The Ultimate Comics Spider-Man run, which deals with sort of Miles Morales' origin story and introduction, and the Spider-Verse event as well. I read the trade paperback of Spider-Verse and really loved all of them. And I mean, the reasons that I have for picking those is because I've always been intrigued by the idea of Miles Morales, because I know you had that whole sort of I won't say explosion of sort of diverse characters, because that makes it sound like the people that say, oh, there's too much diversity. But, you know, when you had sort of Ironheart coming up in Iron Man and Lady Thor and everything, I was really intrigued with the idea of, you know, a half black, half Latino Spider-Man. And it kind of spoke to me, and I know that there was sort of all that talk of Donald Glover playing him when, you know, he was still at an age and look where he could do it. So I really wanted to read that for years beforehand, and then the movie gave me sort of a kick up the butt to do it. But also playing the PS4 game and absolutely adoring that game. One of my favorite suits from that game is the Noir suit. It's one of the first ones that you unlock, and I used it through most of the game, especially all the stealth missions. Yeah. So when I saw the trailer that shows that Spider-Man Noir is going to be in the movie, I was like, well, I have to read the comic before that. And then, you know, Spider-Verse is kind of self-explanatory. I just wanted to see what the event was like before I saw the.
So guys, are we able to give like a kind of short blurb about this movie and synopsis, if you will, without spoiling it? Does anyone want to have a go at that, at giving us kind of like a lowdown at like the general beats of this film and what happens and what to expect?
Well, I know that we could give sort of our impression on, you know, as we've kind of almost dipped into already, sort of our impression of the art style, you know, the kind of sense of humor that the movie has, and our impressions of what we thought. But in terms of sort of the beats of the movie, I think like I know Rahul's done it before for Infinity War, where you sort of give a mild breakdown of sort of the main points of the movie without ruining anything before the spoiler section.
Yeah.
So don't drop this on me. I haven't done any preparation for it. Although I can read out the synopsis on TV Tropes.
You've watched it twice. Help. I haven't. That's short.
Yeah, I've only watched it once. I would step up, but I don't have the.
Yeah, I can read out the synopsis that's on TV Tropes for Into the Spider-Verse, if that sounds good.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a
Give
good,
us that.
concise synopsis.
Yep.
So the film features Miles Morales as Spider-Man, assuming the identity after the apparent death of Peter Parker in his universe. However, a mysterious super collider pulls an assortment of parallel spider people into his dimension, including a living version of Peter, who takes it upon himself to show Miles the ropes of being a superhero as they all try to return home. The story serves as a loose adaptation of the Spider-Man and Spider-Verse storylines, and it's the first Spider-Man movie to be animated.
Cool.
Thanks,
Yes.
TV Tropes. Yeah.
Thank you, TV Tropes. Heroes that you are. So, I mean, like, the main thing about that I think this film does really well, like just getting into general discussion of the movie without trying really hard not to spoiler it, is the fact that the way that it adapts those Spider-Man stories and comics without just straight up using them in a way that previous animated series that we've mentioned on this show and that Marv has mentioned and things like that today have also been able to do that. So in the way that the Batman animated series adapts arcs of Batman and character introductions and origin stories for villains, but in its own right has its own mythology. I guess that's what this film does very well, in the way that it has adapted the comics and brought Miles Morales in and given us an overview of who Miles is and you know, like, given us a Miles origin, I guess, without straight up taking
Panel
the comics
for panel.
panel for panel, trying to put the comics on the screen, and in doing so has created its own thing, its own mythology, which I really liked.
Yeah, I had the same sort of thought, because one thought that I had after the movie was that it had done pretty much what the MCU tends to do with like some of the bigger stories that it's handled. Because the comparison that I had in my mind, because I have read Spider-Verse, and there's like hundreds of different Spider-Men from hundreds of different you know, Marvel universes in the comic. You know, the fact that they've narrowed it down to it's 5, isn't it? 5 total in the movie. The fact that they've done that is the same sort of thing, depending on who you talk to, for better or worse, that Marvel did with Civil War, where, you know, you read the Civil War comic and, you know, it's the X-Men, it's Fantastic Four, everyone's involved in the fight, everyone picks a side. Whereas, you know, in Civil War, you know, you look at the airport scene and it's like, 10, 12 heroes fighting.
Yeah.
But because it serves the narrative of a movie to not have 100 people, especially people who haven't been introduced before, all suddenly appearing on screen, it really streamlines it and gives you the heart of the story and the beats of the comic without getting tied up in the minutiae of it.
Yeah, and
this is the genius of like Lord and Miller, because they're not only doing the condensing of the comic book storylines, but also what the audience has come to expect from Spider-Man movies and like superhero movies in general. Because I really love how well written like the opening lines of this movie are, where it's Peter Parker saying, "Let's do this one last time," and we get this comic book themed like summarization of all the things that particular Spider-Man as Peter Parker went through. So, and as an audience, we've seen Spider-Man's origin story so many times. So the fact that it says, "Let's do this one last time," as though like alluding to the fact that we've seen that, you know, 100 times before. But then also when you get to watch the rest of the movie, you realize it's become its own structure for introducing each new Spider-Man as well. Like, it condenses Peter Parker's storyline that we've seen before, tying it to the like Sam Raimi films, or maybe not tying, but at least alluding to or like making fun reference to. And just introducing this repeated structure that is a really deft way of like summarizing who each new Spider-Person is, where they've come from, and what they can do. It's genius writing.
Yeah, it's really nice how it does that and doesn't treat you like an idiot. Like, because a lot of these, you know, like it doesn't treat you like an idiot in the way that it goes through the whole origin, has to tell you who Spider-Man is over again. The movie is self-aware, and knows that is public knowledge now. Like, everyone knows that Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider and his uncle died, and that's what made him want to be a superhero. You know, everyone knows that well, that's the TLDR, like a really, really bad TLDR, but that's the TLDR. Everyone knows that now. That's public knowledge. There's no need to go over that again. So, you know, they just give you kind of like a short beat of who Spider-Man is. And that's where the movie begins. And it's really good how it does that, how it doesn't treat you like a complete idiot going into it. And it doesn't, like, cause the audience, like, even, you know, like I say, there's just the general public knowledge. Everyone knows what's, you know, like, let's forget that part. We know that. We know his uncle died. We know this happened. We know that happened. We know who these characters are.
But there's also a bit of, like, so you say respect for the audience, but also a respect for not only the old stories, but for the new stories. Because, like, everyone loves the old Spider-Man movies. Yeah. Everyone loves Peter Parker. It's cool. We need to, you know, we can stop going on about that. Part of this movie is passing the torch on to not just Miles, but all these other Spideys as well. Yeah. And, like, it's very respectful of that. Like, you can have all this reverence for Peter Parker, but let's, you know, we're not here to talk about him in essence. We're here to talk about these new guys. Yeah. We're here to talk about Miles. Yeah. So let's do this one last time. I think that's great.
It's a celebration of what Spider-Man means to different people and how there truly is a comic for everyone. Because when you look at these different characters, like each of these different Spider-Men and women that turn up in this film, like Gwen Stacy, for example, Spider-Gwen and so forth. It's just perfect for displaying that and for displaying, like, this is the torch passing to a new generation of comic fans. And this is a modern Spider-Man story for today's world and today's comic fans. And this is what, you know, this is what it is, the passing of the torch from Peter Parker to the next generation of heroes that people will look up to and aspire to. Which is these various other Spider people that turn up in this new film from various different universes, and like the various universes, you know, again, the way they do that, the way they display it, and each one has their own thing. There truly is a comic for everyone, and that's what I like the most about it, is the fact that it going into it, you know, like that is like our dogma. Comics are for everyone, right? Our kind of like motto and everything else. So going into that, thinking like that, and you know, wanting people to think, it truly displays that, and I love that about it, like, as a celebration of comics and the fact comics are for everyone, and the fact that kids will watch this and have something that they can latch onto, and everyone has something they can identify with in this film, I think is a really cool thing about this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of those statements. I mean, as like a general sort of rundown of what I took from this and what I enjoyed, it's hard to find a place to start, but I think the best place to start is the animation. I think the animation manages to thread the needle so well on loads of different styles, while also creating its own unique style to begin with, while also at the same time not banging you over the head with all these different styles. And how they managed to get all this stuff to work together is like mind-boggling to me. So like if you've watched the trailers, the general animation style is it has this great look of obviously being 3D animation, but it has a lot of the styles, the shading, the linings of like 2D animation, and particularly 2D art that you'd find in a comic. You have like color bleeding, especially in the backgrounds, which is reminiscent of like the printing process and the color bleeding you'd get in physical comics. And also stuff like Ben-Day dots. So like if you're familiar with like pop art and the various sort of color imprints you'd get on that, you have that as sort of a filter going throughout the film, but it doesn't bombard you. But when it pops up, I don't know, it works. Usually a confluence of so many different styles ends up pushing you out of the film because it would make it so like, oh, I'm aware this is postmodern and there's so many things coming out and I'm being made aware of that I'm watching a film. But instead, all of this stuff serves effectively to pull you into the film. Everyone and their mum who has said anything about this movie has said what I'm about to say, but it's very true. It is likely the most genuine representation of like a comic book on the screen, hands down. And I'm not just talking about like stuff that's also in the trailers, like text bubbles popping up and things like that. Just the general feel of everything. You feel you're in this world. We're pulled into this world like some of the characters in the movie. And I think that really starts to take you on this roller coaster. And, just the way they, there's so much more for me to go into spoilers, but just the way, like, certain characters, the characters from the different dimensions, they all have their unique style and it's consistent throughout. And they're in loads of scenes together, but it never jars. It always gels really well. Even just the general motion of it where like, I think they go between, animating, on twos, which is, every other frame, but also animating on ones, which is every frame. And I think you get that cool sort of, not like sort of clay animation effect sometimes where there's a sort of, an artful cadence to the movement. And then when it ramps up to action, it switches, like effortlessly and, the way it all comes together is what, knocks me out of the park. Like there's frames here and there, that just cut to like a bright, like comic book panel. And it's done so well. Like Rahul's talking about at the beginning we have that, Peter saying like, this is, let's go through this one more time. And the way that's represented with like a comic book and just going through all these bits, it's done so well. I can't stop talking about the animation, but it's one of those things where just inherent to what it is, it has to be seen, to be believed. And I don't think it's overstating it too much to praise, what's being done here with the animation.
Yeah, part of the praise for me though is like you talk about it not hammering you on the head about it being postmodern and like not taking you out of the fact that, oh look, I'm watching a movie. They show a lot of restraint. Like they have all these options open to represent something in a comic book way. That, they could use this comic book format. They could use all this paneling. They could use this bold lettering and all of that. But they show so much restraint. Like I noticed, and I don't think this is a spoiler. I noticed one instance where they used a scene transition in the form of like a page turning. They used that once in the entire movie. Like they could have littered the movie with that kind of stuff to make it more quote unquote comic booky. But and I think that shows so much integrity and like maturity on how to tell that story from this medium.
Yeah, definitely. Cause like, I mean, a comparison to that, which we've mentioned, offcast, is Ang Lee's Hulk movie, where that Ang Lee is like ramping it up in the Avid, trying to make this as comic as possible, and it's just really distracting when the camera zooms out and we see all these panels. It doesn't feel endearing or charming. It just feels like too much. And the main thing, it didn't feel authentic.
Yeah, you took words out of my mouth, because one of the things that I wanted to say, in terms of them using different art styles and, like you were saying, different effects really effectively, to double up on words, is that they managed to maintain consistency. Like, even though you have all these different styles, all these different effects, all these different things that they do to sort of, TMCR, bring the comic to life, it didn't feel like you were just being sort of dragged from one thing to another. It was very, very consistent. And every time something new happened that they did to give those effects, you're sort of like, oh yeah, rather than being like, oh, yep, I've seen that now. I can see the filmmaking process. It's just like, this is the movie and it's taking me for a ride. It's really, really well done.
Yeah. An animated roller coaster. It was cool. No, it's, I especially enjoyed the fact that it actually looks like a comic. Like, in places, it truly does look like a comic, and the way they've managed to translate that to screen, like down to like the points where there is actually like paneling and things like that, it just looks really cool. And the way that they've incorporated that into, and the way that each, I mean, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but I hope it's not, but where each character has their own style in their own universe before being brought into the main universe.
Yeah, they each have their own like different color scheme and like slightly different, I don't know, like shading or grading effects. Like there's all these different things, and like Leon was saying, they because there's enough going on and it's held back enough that it all kind of fits together instead of looking like they've been cut and pasted from lots of different places and then splatted onto one, I don't know, outside universe. I think it all does run together nicely. And
it's fun in the same way it's fun to see different takes on a character from different artists and writers. And then
I think a lot of that is to do with how well they realized Miles's world, because Miles's world ends up being our baseline, and if the baseline was too flat or too realistic, then having the other art styles for the other Spider-Man and Spider-Woman that come into it would be really jarring. But because Miles's world is sort of a nice, I don't want to say like in between as if it's watered down, but a nice in between to say, you know, Peter Parker's world, you know, Spider-Man Noir's world, even Spider-Ham's world, when they are all together or when they are flitting between those characters' art styles, it works well because the background palette that they've been put onto isn't too jarring in comparison to their individual styles.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. And I think if I had to have one criticism of the animation style, it would be the fact that in places there is like a fuzz or a lack of focus. Where, you know, where it kind of, I know it's doing it on purpose because that's what the film, where it unfocuses, but that was messing with my head a little bit.
Yeah, it was almost like some of the backgrounds. It was almost like watching a 3D movie without the glasses.
Yes.
Yeah, with the red-blue disparate thing.
And I know what they're doing. They're doing the thing where if you look close enough at an old printed comic, you can see the separate colours. But like, it just, for me, like, it just messed with my head a little bit when I was watching it. And it just felt like I had to clean my glasses all the time or something. Or like, maybe, you know, maybe my eyes are worse than I thought they were or something like that. It's just, yeah. That was my one criticism.
I've heard that criticism come up a lot, and I think most people do preface it with like, I think they temper that because it's like, I know what they were going for, but it just made my head hurt a little. Like, that's come up on Twitter a lot, I've noticed in the last week.
Yeah. And it does make your head hurt. Because it's what the world looks like when you've got a migraine.
To be fair, that's like everything being just slightly blurry is my entire life, so I didn't mind it on screen that much. Like, it didn't bother me.
But yeah, that's got to be my one criticism of the animation. But I think otherwise, it's just like, I mean, even like, I guess we can get onto character designs now. Like, spoiler-free character design discussion, but like, it's the character designs and the way they portray certain villains in this film and things like that, and the way they portray some of the other spiders and things is just really, really cool. And I just how like different the character designs are and how they lean into certain aspects of certain characters very well. Instead of having like a kind of like a template and just like punching cookies kind of thing. It's like they kind of like they lean into the quirks of these characters in a kind of like a way that like almost like they are caricatures of cartoon characters, if that makes sense. So a caricature of a caricature. And it just
it's very knowing that way, isn't it?
Yeah, and it just looks so cool.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think especially if we're looking at if we're starting on like Miles, I think the character design team and the animation team do a really good job, like adapting Sarah Pichelli, one of the co-creators of Miles Morales, and all the other artists who have covered Miles since then, as well as influences pulled in from various people who've worked on it. So on Twitter, I saw, I believe it was Sanford Green had done some sketches, some character like concept sketches, and some of that stuff on the page is in the film. So it's really cool that all these different influences have pulled in. But yeah, with Miles, I think his general look, because from what I know of Miles from the book, he generally has quite like a short sort of like ball fade going on, and in the movie he's got this great head of hair that is, I mean, me and Marvel speaking about this straight off the film, like the way it's animated and the way it reacts to surfaces and everything like that is just so cool to see, like 4A or 4B hair animated like well.
It's so crazy because like the like, you know, you see individual strands of hair, and like, you know, when Gwen takes her mask off and you see her hair, you're really blown away by it. But the way that you have his like little kinky afro react to, like you said, surfaces, and there's a scene where he leans against a surface, and the way that his hair pushes against it itself is animated so well. The attention to detail is incredible.
Yeah, and like things like that. I mean, his general look with his like Chicago Air Jordans and the jacket and the hoodie and all that stuff, all the stuff that's in the posters and the trailers, it just looks so good. I don't know. I think they do a really good job, because there's a lot, and a part of this I'll speak about more when I'm talking about how they handle the story, but there's a lot resting on how well the main character does, especially being, for most people, a fresh new Spider-Man. And I think in design and voice acting and writing and just everything else they sort of bring to that character, I think it is so effective and works so well that it echoes out to all the other characters and all the other things going on in the film. And yeah, I just think, like, as we were mentioning before, and the different styles, I love the way how people like Penny Parker, like, is 3D, but is 2D, but it works.
Yeah.
And has all these, like, anime tropes, as you would have seen, and it fits so well into the universe. You've got, like, a Spider Noir, and it's not just like a grayscale character. Like, there's like certain animation things that are only happening to that character, and as Rahul was saying, the way the grading and the shading it's done so well. Like, in ways, just in the characters alone, they've created like multiple movies worth of like animation and character design. It is remarkable, and like the way how, like as you were saying, Greg, like the villains, who I won't go into detail here, but the way that the villains are portrayed, it's not like what you've seen before. It's not like, oh, this is a pitch perfect adaptation of this artist's work. But what it is, it's a couple spoonfuls of this, a couple spoons of this, and then it's taken inspiration from all these different areas to create something like fresh. And I think everything just has a really cool look, and they don't really need to just go into it. They just, because the art and the designs work so well on their own, you're just like, boom, I get what this is putting out, and I'm down for it.
I think we can close out by saying that's like a general theme throughout the design of the film, where it's not so much pitch perfect adaptations of people's work, more or less a spoonful of everything that character has been in its run up to this movie for, I think, pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah, before we close off on character design, can I add a couple more points that I had?
Yeah, go ahead.
Here. So, like, Leon talking about Miles's hair, and like, it reminded me of, I don't know if any of you have played Uncharted 4. I know Marvin has, but there's a character in it called Nadine Ross who has like really thick, dark, like curly hair, and like seeing the way that her hair was animated in that game, And like you could tell how much love and attention had gone into it, and you realize you don't see that very often in video games because it's so easy to portray like flat, shiny, smooth, like either like light or brunette hair, but seeing like this dark, thick, curly hair, which I can relate to, I don't know, that means something that you can see that portrayed on screen. And I think that meant a lot from Miles as well. Like it's like, when was the last time you saw that kind of haircut and that kind of hair itself represented in an animated movie, and to have it look like not realistic would be the right word, but like the way that the light reflects off it and the way that it reacts, and that the hair acts differently than like the flowing smooth hair that was praised when The Incredibles came out, for example. Like it's so impressive. And then a second thing I wanted to point out was I saw a tweet by an artist that I follow on Twitter called Brittany Myers. I think it was a few days ago, so 13th of December, she tweeted about some generics that she worked on for Into the Spider-Verse, so all the background characters that are littered throughout New York City. And like, you could just see how much attention they paid into putting like diverse street fashion into all of these characters, and this like whole angular, blocky, but kind of, I don't know, just very cool aesthetic. And I don't know, I think it's worth looking that up. Her name's Brittany Myers, to see the kind of stuff that went into the protagonist characters, or like just the background environmental people on the street characters. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it is really cool to think about, like, and to see the amount of love and attention and work that's gone into realizing this, and to get things, to represent things properly. And to make an effort with that and everything else is really great. I did enjoy that. Are we about ready to move on to spoilers?
I would say so.
Go on, Leon. I was going to ask you if you wanted to talk about music.
Yeah.
There's a few more like production technical stuff that I'll just run off before we go to spoilers to not delay it too much. I think like as I was talking about before in terms of the story, obviously we're going to go into this in more detail, but one of the things that I think is really good about this, I mean, animation as a craft is usually about economical flow of information. A lot of the times these things are storyboarded more than they're scripted. I think now in modern times they're scripted as much as they're storyboarded, but what I think is so well here is that this movie has to do so much. It has to introduce ostensibly a new character to the world. It then has to introduce all these other characters. It then has to deal with the idea of multiple verses. It then has to deal with like various villains, and there's so much going on that it could have easily buckled under its own weight, and I think that a lot of praise needs to be put on the people that shepherded this through. So like Lord and Miller are like the sort of main producers on there, and they sort of shepherded this to they sort of birthed this movie in a way, and have helped carry it along. But I think in particular Phil Lord and Rodney Ruffman's writing, I think is so it's so efficient in getting these things across, and it's not like I said, it's not surprising coming from one half of Lord and Miller, but like I think a lot is could be said about how well they streamline and not simplify, but and I don't know, like just comparing this to what I know and what I've read of some of these things in the actual books, it's so much cleaner in this movie that I prefer the movie version of some of these origins. And that's kind of surprising when you think about it, because a lot of times you lose so much detail in adaptations just by necessity. But I think like in them streamlining it in this way, it's amazing how well it works. And I think a lot of praise needs to go to the three directors, Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Ruffman again. And I think they managed to bring all these elements that I think are really good together. I'll leave my praise of the cast until spoilers, because for time on this end. But I think that the performances that we get are just so. They're so. They feel so true to the character, even on characters that we've only just been introduced to, and I think that is really well. Or even more so, characters that we've had decades of and different versions, they managed to make their versions of these characters their own, and I think that is just so cool, because I think VO work is not really understood. A lot of people think people sit in a room for like an hour reading out lines, but I think the work done here helps. Just as the script does, just as the overall direction does, helps pull us through this journey. And like I've seen it twice, and even on the second time, I just didn't feel any drag whatsoever. I just felt pulled through the story, but I didn't feel like it was just action to action to action, and we were skipping over character stuff. And the character stuff is super affecting and poignant. And I think all of that works really well to serve the greater narrative and the greater story, and the audience's ride through that. And I just think it's something that is attempted in a lot of movies, but even stuff like the MCU, I don't feel they nail that a lot of the time. They'll nail elements, but not every element. So I think that's just remarkable in itself. I think the Daniel Pemberton score is really cool. It manages to take elements of Danny Elfman's scores from the Sam Raimi movies, as well as because I think the Spider-Man game does this well. I haven't got the composer's name to my head at the moment, but I think that does a good job, from what I've heard, of pulling in these themes and having that metropolitan New York feel of like web slinging through buildings, and portraying the drama of that, and the intensity of that, and the pleasure and the freeing nature of that through sound, but also having really good drama beats. And I think that Pemberton's work on this is super effective in that regard. I would also, I mean, I could go on forever, but I'll say last thing before spoilers that I'll say is that I think that a lot of the themes in this movie are super poignant. I think that they're handled really well. I don't think they are bashing you over the head with any particular thing, and they also don't feel trite or cliche, despite them being influenced from stuff from the very original Spider-Man comics with that Lee and Ditko were doing. But I just think that it's just like the character that has endured through these decades, the film itself and its messages and themes managed to be as resonant and also as timeless as those. And I think that all these different elements together work to give us a movie that works on multiple levels, and I think it works for multiple audiences. That is quite, in ways, quite intense for, like, I would say for younger kids. But it manages to be one of those movies that has something for everyone, whether young kids, whether teenagers, whether like millennials like us, and even Generation X's. I think it just has something for everyone, and the direction, the script, and all of that work in service to giving this whole package that just feels really polished and really considered.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much my blurb.
All in all, I would say that it is So overall, before we move on to spoilers, all in all, I'd say that it's a great representation of what Spider-Man is and what Spider-Man means to comic fans today, and a modern Spider-Man story for today's world and today's fans, and hopefully to make some new fans. Like, hopefully it will bring some new people on board and introduce the Marvel world and the magic of Marvel to some unsuspecting kids that might, in the same way that we had that from the Spider-Man cartoon in our youth and such. It might be something that brings new people on board, which I would really love. I would really love for that to happen. And yeah, it's just a great film. I loved it. Definitely. And yeah, it's representative, as Leon laid out, it's representative of today's society and the fabric of that society and today's comic fans, the youth of today and everything else, which I really enjoyed. It was really cool. Yeah. So I guess we're on to spoilers now.
The juicy stuff.
Yes. So if you've not already seen the film, this is where you stop listening. Once you've seen the film, come back and listen to the rest of our discussion next, which we're going to be going into, sort of like delving deeper into the film, and we're going to be talking spoilers. So yeah, if you've not already seen it, stop listening now. So guys, spoiler section. I want to kick this off by the way that this movie handles the Miles Morales origin story, with the death of Peter Parker and the whole thing with the Green Goblin and everything else. I think
I was going to say, that's one thing that I was careful to talk about in the non-spoiler section, is that the trailer introduces the concept of one Peter Parker, but we actually end up seeing two different Peter Parkers. We see Peter Parker, the 26-year-old blonde, perfect version of Spider-Man, portrayed by Chris Pine, and then he's quickly, he is killed off in the opening conflict and replaced by Peter B. Parker, who is played by I've forgotten his name. Does anybody have his
Jake
name?
Johnson?
Jake Johnson.
Jake Johnson. And I love that they kept that reveal quite close to their chests in the trailer. As far as I remember, I thought that was a really nice touch. We get those two different versions of him. Like, one who is the pristine, shining version who died too young, and this other version who's going through a bit of a midlife crisis and has been handling so many more different trials than we've seen, I think, before for Peter Parker.
I really like this version of Spider-Man. I call him sad divorcee Spider-Man with dough belly action. But I really like...
Those are literally just his adjectives.
Yeah. I really like this version of Spider-Man because he's like what I would imagine, because the amount of crap that the sheer amount, the mudslide of poop that Peter Parker has waded through, in the comics up to today, from inception, right? I feel like this is what Peter Parker would really be like. I feel this is the broken man that we would have in front of us if we were to meet Peter Parker. This is what Peter Parker would be like today. This kind of tired old, he's just fed up, and I'd be fed up too if half that stuff had happened to me,
Well, it's
jaded.
Well, because Leon mentioned how this film can serve so many different people, it can mean so many things to lots of different types of people. The fact that there is a version of Peter Parker who's doughy, sad, divorced dad version, which is, must be a very relatable thing to a lot of people. That's not what I focused on at all in both of my viewings. I only really thought about it after I'd seen it for the second time, because I was so focused on Miles' story. There is this whole subset, this whole subplot of how Peter B. Parker comes to deal with his loss and, coming to terms with the fact that he needs love in his life and what it means for him to, embrace having children and all this and that. That was kind of secondary to me after all the Miles stuff. So I don't know how you guys felt about all that.
Yeah, I mean, having only seen it once, it did shine through to me a bit more, when I watched it, Peter B. Parker's, sort of story arc. But it's played very subtly. it's not, again, I know we keep using this term throughout the whole episode, but it's not beating you over the head with it. You know, he comes in, he's ultra jaded, very dismissive of Miles. It's seeded in that he didn't want kids, and that's sort of what drove him and MJ apart, among other things. But you have all these little moments where, when he's teaching Miles to web swing, and it's like, yeah, you're getting it, kid, thwip it out, and he's, getting more and more into it. And then when you have I think it's the conflict before the final conflict, or it might be the start of the final conflict, sorry, where, Miles is handling his business and Peter B. Parker's sort of like, yeah, you're doing it. I'm so proud of you. I should have kids, and then
I have kids, and then he has to run off and do the next thing.
Yeah. And then, just before everyone's sort of separating out and they're deciding who has to stay behind, he finally has that epiphany moment where it's like, you can handle this. Everything's going to be okay. I leave it to you. I trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, so for me, I found both of those storylines intertwined almost inseparably. So as much as this was like the Miles show for me, which it very much is, Peter V. Parker, what I thought I was going to get from the trailers is that sort of like sad sack, kind of like don't meet your heroes, kind of lame-o, not quite as bad as Spider-Man Reign, but deep cut for you hardcore ACers out there. But I thought we were going to get this sort of lame, sort of like blah, superheroing is blah blah blah. But despite the fact that he is older, podgier, sort of divorced Spider-Man, he's still fucking Spider-Man. He's still a good Spider-Man. He's not like he's tripping over and whacking into stuff. He's super competent still, and that's what I really liked about it, because it ties into his the general thing of Spider-Man, and what the movie tells us, where it's about getting up. It's about getting up again, and he has that, and there's so many scenes later on where, as he starts to sort of move more into that mentor / father figure type role, it never feels like it just comes out of anywhere, and just because the story needs it to. It's like, yeah, it's seeded so well. Like when Gwen, Miles, and Peter go to Aunt May's, and they go down to the lab, and then they meet the others. They're they're all quizzing him, like, can you do this? Are you ready? And he's like, yeah. Like, he can go invisible, but not on command. And he's got the venom spike thing. It's like, but not on command. And it's like, but he's still there cheerleading him. And at that point, they've only really done the bit where they went to the Alchemax bit, and he's teaching him how to web sling. But just in those parts, you have that bit in the vent where he's like,
calling it out.
Yeah, but he's like,
nobody's ever on my side. Right?
Yeah, he phrases it in a way of like a work thing, and it's just like, usually on the job, I'm not used to having people on my side. And there you can sort of feel the beginning, and during that whole bit of the fight, and he's still coming out, and he's still like, I got this, and he does kind of have it, and he's like, oh yeah. He's still jumping in and out, and he's just like, well, good news, you don't need this anymore. You don't need the monitor. And he tosses it, and it's like, that stuff there, I don't know, it's done so effectively, I think, because it never, him being slobby older Spider-Man is played for laughs, but it's never just a joke. It is tied into his character, at a fundamental, DNA level. So that when we have that stuff, like when he, sort of the MJ bread roll scene, or him going in the lab and picking up the picture, it doesn't just feel like, well, here's the bit where we've got to remind us that it actually feels real. Yeah. So then when we have that payoff right at the end, where he's like, his whole thing is, I'm the hero, I'm going to stay behind, Miles isn't ready yet. And then Miles comes out, proves he's ready, but he's still yeah, I'm going to try and do it. And then Miles is just like, he's holding him, and he's just like, you got to go home, man. And that hit me a lot on the first time, because you have the thing where they both there for each other in that really interesting way. So it's like, Peter gives Miles what he needs earlier, where it's like, how will I know when I'm ready? Where they're in his dorm room before they all leave. And he's like, you won't. And they all just go. Miles has that scene with his father, and the echoes of what Peter told him. So when he does the jump off the skyscraper, which I'll talk about more, because that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie this year, Like, it feels so earned and real that and normally that's just the moment. You have the father figures giving the character what they need and they do it. But the fact that feeds into Miles then having his moment, giving Peter what he needs, telling him, you can do it, you've got to go home, man. Like, like, a lot of movies just wouldn't handle that so deftly. Like, there's no reason to, kind of, because he's not really the main character. But the fact that they pay off his storyline as part of that in such a such a clean, like, finessed way, I just got a lot of love for.
Yeah, it was handled very well because, like you said, it's not necessarily his movie, but, if Miles wasn't in this, you'd still have enough of Peter B. Parker to make a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, definitely.
And then one thing that I did like, I know you're going to get into the skyscraper scene later on, but the way that they lead up into that is done because it's done visually. It reminded me a lot of in Night's End when, and again, this is again a deep cut for anyone who hasn't read the comic, but when Bruce Wayne is sort of trying to come back as Batman and he's training under Lady Shiva and coming back to Gotham and all that stuff, there's multiple moments where in between everything that's happening, like, everything will stop and it will cut to him not in the Batsuit because he's not ready to wear the mantle yet, on top of a gargoyle, and it's the first gargoyle that he ever jumped off in his year one, holding a grappling hook and a batarang, and he's poised to jump off and he's got this whole internal monologue, and then the last panel is him walking away wordlessly because he knows he's not ready yet, and it leads up and it leads up and it leads up, and then right near the end of the book, when he's ready to come back to Gotham as Batman, he's in the suit. You don't see the lead up. You see a full page splash of him jumping off the gargoyle, and the internal monologue is about how free he feels. It's like riding a bike. It's second nature. He feels the blood pulsing through his veins, blah, blah, blah. But it's just that lead up and payoff to him being ready to make the leap is what I felt when I was watching Miles. When he's, running up the stairs to the skyscraper, it's too high. He runs into a 2-story building. He's still not ready. And then, like you said, he's in the costume. He jumps off the skyscraper. It's done visually without beating you over the head of, this is a training montage. Yeah.
And, like, the whole the other thing the other sort of, like, line running through the film, it is obviously, like, the other Miles kind of the Miles narrative is like the expectation thing, like what people expect of him and what people expect him to be, and you're not ready, like, but he's going to be his own Spider-Man, and he becomes his own Spider-Man, and he does that for himself, and like even down to when he's customizing the suit in, like the incredibly badass Aunt May's Spider Cave. Like with the spray paint. I love that bit where he goes down there to make the suit, and Aunt May's just sat there like, like she's basically Alfred. Yeah.
Alfred Edna Mode.
Yeah. That was really cool. That was. The Spider Cave was a really cool bit for me. Like when they all get together in the Spider Cave below the shed, and Peter B. Parker's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a shed full of spider gear." Yeah. We know what your shed full of spider gear looks like. It's the one that we've probably seen in a comic or two some point, where it's just like because Spider-Man, like, he never has anything on that level, does he? Ever. He's always just like really kind of like cobbled together, kind of like sad hiding place type thing.
It's basically becomes, as you allude to, like the Batcave, because as we go down, I mean, this is a movie stuffed to the gills with stuff in the background and Easter eggs and all that. Yeah. And one of the biggest bits of Easter eggs we get is when we are in the Spider Cave, and you've got it all. You've got the spider vehicles. You've got all the different suits. It's so cool.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. You see all those suits in like, it's a really Batman way of displaying your suits.
Yeah.
Like, totally. And, that Spider-Man dune buggy that will...
Yeah. that plucked a heartstring for me, because I remember seeing the toys as a kid, hearing about it in the comics, and then it comes up is a very big part of Spider-Verse as well, because Miles has his own little mission in Spider-Verse to collect some of the younger heroes, and he uses the spider buggy to get them.
Yeah. And you've read Old Man Logan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man. So there you go. It comes up again.
Yeah. Hawkeye and Wolverine traveling across the blind Hawkeye and old
Yeah.
Wolverine traveling across the America in the Spider-Man buggy.
One thing I loved about the Spider Cave and Aunt May is again going back to how they've sort of tied things together in a very efficient way, is that a big part of the Miles Morales Ultimate Spider-Man run is that Aunt May in particular, but May, Gwen Stacy, and MJ are very much there for Miles while he's sort of finding himself. And it doesn't take them very long to figure out that he's the new Spider-Man. You know, Aunt May is very sort of, not dismissive, just distrustful of him taking up the mantle. Gwen is outwardly hostile to him at the very beginning. And there's a wonderful moment. It's a huge payoff where, Aunt May says, I need to see this boy. And she goes around to his house with Gwen and MJ. And you have like the old guard of like the most important people in Peter Parker's life come together, and Aunt May hands him a box, opens it up, and it's Peter Parker's web shooters. Yeah. So it's literally, the Spider family handing the mantle to Miles. So I love that Aunt May was a big part of the movie for that, in him sort of getting together with the Spider-Men.
And they did it in a similar way where she had web shooters ready for him when he got down to the cave.
Yeah.
That she crafted herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sorry, continue.
You finish your point, because I was going to move on to something.
So was I, so you might as well continue.
Before either of you do, with the whole Peter B. Parker thing, when I was talking before about there being so many Spider-Men in the comic and them condensing it down, it runs the gamut of like really hopeful Spider-Men to like Spider-Man who murder people. And obviously superior Spider-Man's in there as well, so arsehole Spider-Man. But like the perfect Peter Parker that's played by Chris Pine is very, very reminiscent of, there's a version of Ben Reilly in Spider-Verse who plays a perfect Spider-Man who has never lost a battle. No one's died. He never lost Gwen Stacy. He never broke up with MJ. He's he's almost like the Flash in that he's just perfectly quippy, almost annoyingly hopeful. And then Peter B. Parker sort of encapsulates all of the sort of dour side of the Spider-Man in the group. So I like that they managed to sort of condense all of that down as well.
Well, it's the difference between the Spider-Man we were given in the 90s and how tortured and how, I mean, I'm not saying Ultimate Spider-Man wasn't tortured, but like how kind of like hard Peter Parker's life was in those comics. Like, from the 60s up into the 90s, up into the year 2000, like in the Amazing Spider-Man books I'm talking about, and the Spectacular Spider, and then like the Ultimate Spider-Man is this clean young version of Spider-Man who dies young and passes the mantle to Miles, which is kind of what happens in the comics as well. Which is, it's cool how they adapted that. So I think we should move on to villains. Designs.
Can I say the thing that I was about to say?
Say the thing you were about to say. Say it.
So I was going to talk about May and Peter B. Parker's first meeting, like when he shoots the web into the doorbell and it rings, and it's like this brief moment of humor, and then it suddenly drops into pathos where he's like, "I'm not ready for this. Like I almost don't want to see her," because like he's come from a universe where he's had to bury his aunt, and she's in this universe where she's just buried her nephew, and like it's this beautiful and sad and like sweet moment of them like finding it's the wrong person for each of them, but they both understand it because they know the circumstances, and like because it really informs what Peter B. Parker's state of mind is, because like he's constantly on the verge of giving up, but never does. Like one of the theses of this movie is like you keep getting back up, and it ties in nicely to how Miles keeps giving him this hope, keeps giving him this reason to continue. Because like the ultimate version of him giving up is almost that thing where he wants to be the sacrifice. He wants to be the one. He's like, I've got nothing to live for, so I might as well be the one who stays behind and pushes the button and lets everyone else get back home.
Yeah.
And I love that the way it flips at the end, where like Leon was saying, where Miles says, "Man, you got to go home." You know, like it's that thing where they've given each other that renewed sense of purpose. Like Peter B. Parker wouldn't have had that. He would have kept moping throughout his life if he hadn't been pulled into this universe and met Miles. And I think I thought that character arc was really well developed. Like I know I mentioned earlier that I didn't really care for him as a he wasn't the focus. But I think, like Leon said, it is inexorably tied together. There is a lot going on for his character. It just wasn't the focus for me on the first time. And I didn't really feel it until, after I'd sat down and thought about it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it how it all comes sort of full circle and everything else. That's really cool. But yeah, like the villain designs. Characters, villain designs I wanted to get onto, because this is the bit I really wanted to talk about. Because there's some really, really cool designs in this movie, and one of the biggest ones for me, one of my favourites. I think you mentioned before we started recording, actually, Ray, your favourite as well was Olivia Octavius.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I like the seeding of that character as well, because it's not immediately obvious that she's going to be a villain, that she's going to be, in essence, Dr. Octopus. But in hindsight, like on second viewing, I realized there's so many hints to her being the villain. Like the first time you see her, there's literally an octopus arm on her office desk. Her glasses are octagons. The badge that she is on the chair when she straps Peter to it is an octagon. And the fact that she's like a quantum physicist, like it should be the first hint that she's going to be the villain,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that I just loved her character design. I love the way she, like, her hair is all springing out.
Yeah.
And, like, she has all those, like, the cool colours around her scarf and everything. It's almost reminiscent of, like, the quote-unquote Banksy art that happens when the universes collide, like, all the different colours melding together. I thought there's some great character design for her.
Also, they're, like, mega
art,
sly of her, because in the bit in the class where he meets, like, Gwen, and she's on screen, but like where Miles is standing, so it has her name, Olivia, and there's an O, but where he's standing you can't see the rest.
They're sly with Gwen as well.
We had a conversation about this after the film, where if you were a teenage girl, and like, it all makes sense in hindsight, but if you were a teenage girl and some dude who keeps talking about how he's just hit puberty puts his sticky hands on your hair and then it gets stuck, you would be freaked out, right? Like, you would not give that kid the time of day ever again. But like, she's super chill about it. Like, she's, almost quite understanding, like, up until the point where they have to cut her hair off. And then after the reveal that she's, not just like, as we all know, she's Gwen, but she's also someone from a different universe, came here in advance of Miles Morales. She's not this universe's Gwen Stacy. It all makes sense in the wrap up.
Yeah. And just the whole thing about her haircut, like, you don't get to like my haircut.
Yeah, I love that line. I love that.
Yeah. But like, back to Olivia Octavius, character design, like, you notice like that when she puts her hair up, when she gets the octopus legs out, like, her head is almost octopus shaped.
Yeah.
And
I like that her tentacles are like hydraulically operated instead of mechanically operated. Like,
that was
Octavius's are normally.
Yeah, it's all very cool. What do you guys think of the Scorpion?
I like the Scorpion, because it's like the ultimate comic Scorpion, because in the Miles Morales run, Scorpion is this big gangster from Mexico City who has like a scorpion hook on a chain that he uses to beat people to death, basically. So it's kind of like they took that and then kind of added a dash of Scorpion King to him from the Scorpion King movie.
And also the original Scorpion being a man trapped in a suit.
Yeah.
With the poison thing and everything, yeah. So they kind of like mashed it all together, which is what we were saying before we got on to spoilers about how all the characters in this seem to be a spoonful of everything that character has been throughout comics. Like, I think the one character design I wasn't so sold on was Kingpin, because I didn't like his head being inside his body.
Oh, there was when me, Rahul and Leon were watching it in the cinema, there was a guy 2 rows back from us where every single time Kingpin came on screen, he just burst out in fits of laughter. He just couldn't take him seriously.
I love that they use some animation tricks with Kingpin for like him getting out of the car, where clearly it's physically impossible for him to do so, or like getting into the train carriage at the end. They just don't show that transition. They like cut to him having got out the car, because like it just wouldn't work. How would you even fit in? How would you show him like squeezing himself in through that tiny door?
I feel like there's a piece on the cutting room floor somewhere where we actually get to see that. Like,
I hope so. I hope it's in the extras.
5 minutes of Kingpin trying to cram himself into a box. No, but I mean, I get the idea that he was supposed to be big and imposing and everything else, but like, I don't know, like, I didn't like his head being inside his chest. I think that just kind of like, irritated me more than it should have. I don't know why.
It's kind of cool, like that whole stocky, like it shows that he's got it's more power than fat, which is like a running theme with him.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, I thought like he was just intense and like this larger than life in like every use of that phrase, really.
Yeah.
So when you have that scene at the beginning where he kills Peter, it's shocking.
The explosive temper just comes across really well.
I was just going to say, he's like, whenever he's walking around, whenever he's talking, whenever he's on screen, he almost feels like a tyrant from the Resident Evil games. Like, he's pure imposition. His footsteps, like, boom, the whole cinema, everything shakes when he walks.
Yeah.
Like, you would not want to be in a room with him.
Speaking of everything shaking, Leon went to see this in 4DX or whatever it is, didn't you?
I did, and I lived to tell the tale. So, like, I think the way I explained this on Instagram was that my whole body was sore. Because I don't know, but for those who have not done 4DX or know what it is, it's basically in the cinema you sit on a seat, which are in like collections of 4, and then the individual like rows of 4 are like being on a roller coaster. So they tilt, they move from side to side, and they shock. There's like pressure pads on your lower back, which are more like vibration. And then there's pressure pads in your upper back, which are like being punched in the back. There's water jets on the seat in front. I will say there's a button to switch off water jet, and I cheated and switched the button off because I was wearing 2 sets of glasses. I don't want to have to keep cleaning the 3D glasses, so I switched the water off. But then in front of the screen, you get like foam and sort of snow effects will come down. It feels like there are just hidden fans somewhere because they're constantly being blown by fans, like big fans, and in your seat behind you, there's fans that, so when in the bits like in the forest where there's like bullets, being shot at them or laser or whatever, as those go by, you feel like by your neck.
Oh, nice.
And there's scents as well, though, I didn't really pick up too many, scents because, I don't know, my sense of smell isn't the strongest, but also there weren't any, like, they might have placed burning smell during explosions, but I don't remember that. Well, I have a vivid memory of smelling orange peel at the start, and I was like, oh wow, because they did like a Cineworld trailer which used the 4DX at the beginning, the latest one that has Mary Poppins in it, and I could smell orange peel, and I thought, oh, it's like a Christmas thing. And then I looked to my left, and the guy 2 seats over was peeling an orange.
Who brings an orange into the cinema?
I know, right?
Who does that?
At least it's not noisy.
Yeah.
God. I once went on a date with a girl who brought a Greg's bag of food into the cinema and was eating a tuna and cucumber sandwich and a cheese and onion pasty. And needless to say, there was no second.
Before the movie, like during the trailers or during the movie?
During the movie.
Oh my god.
It's just like that guy that heats up his like really pungent food at work.
Oh, everyone has that in there, right?
Yeah. The guy that heats tuna fish in the microwave at work.
Fish and vegetables.
Tuna fish would be a blessing. It's always mackerel or something, or red snapper. It's like, why are you doing this to us?
Oh, we've got someone that did it with tuna fish, and then I've been at work before, and people bring their food back to their desk where I work sometimes because breaks ain't long enough, and people like do get like full ready meals, like those like ready meals from the fridge aisle, and heat them up, then bring them back to their desk. Which, I mean, it's fine, you know, it smells good, it's food, but like when you're stuck next to it and you can't do anything about it because you're stuck at your desk, and it's just, yeah, it's not good.
Yeah. It's that unwritten rule
Yeah.
where if you're eating it, it's the most delicious smell in the world. But if you're trapped with it, it's just the worst experience. That's why food on public transport should be banned. People who eat hot food on trains and buses are just the scum of the earth.
No.
I'm happy there wasn't any 40x smells during any of the train or bus scenes, because that would have been gross. But another thing they did, which I think is the worst effect of 4DX, is that during like flashes, like explosions, they like flash lights in the cinema. But as I was saying to Rahul and Marv yesterday, that is the worst effect, because that's the one that takes you out of the film mostly. Because after a while, when you've been shaken around gently or roughly, you're just like, this is the film now. This is life. I feel what I see and hear. But then when it flashes, you see that you're in a cinema scene with people, and it's kind of like, ugh.
So there you go. That's what it's like to be beaten up by a chair.
Well, like, there's different ways how it works. So at the beginning, as the score's playing, and you know it's doing the titles of all the different companies like Columbia and Sony and Marvel, but they're like glitching because it's all the different verses. So like there's different versions of the Columbia one, which some are real and some are like not. So that there's like a cowboy lady one where she's shooting off guns, which is quite cool. And as it's flashing between those, the chair isn't going like the sounds are. Instead, it's like winding you back and upwards in a cool motion. It's like prepping you for a film that's about to begin, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that sounds kind of cool.
Some of those action scenes, though, honestly, like especially the last one, I was in pain because you're getting you're going around in circles and getting rocked around as much as Spider-Man is, and I'm like, please stop, just talk this out.
It's like it sounds like those rides that you go to. You know when they were a thing like years ago. Like the last time I went to a theme park, you go in and sit in a cinema screen, and the chairs jerk you about and everything else. And it's like there's like a mine shaft one that I went on, like an Indiana Jones one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, something like I'd say the best version of this is obviously Star Tours at Disney. But I think 4DX is definitely something worth trying, but never as the first way to experience a film. But I'm happy I did it. But I'm also happy I did it with a Cineworld card where it didn't cost me like 25 quid or whatever it cost.
God.
Yeah. No, I don't think I'll be doing there's no place to do 4DX in Leicester as far as I'm aware at the moment anyway. But yeah. It just sounds like it would just take me out of the film, but I mean, when they hone it a little bit, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not such brute force. Won't be an early adapter of 4DX, I don't think. But yeah, just, I mean, like, you come onto the action scenes for this film and everything else, just the whole thing just comes together seamlessly, and especially the animation through that, and the, because we were talking about villain character designs, like the way they've done the Green Goblin in this, which is kind of like an amalgam of Ultimate Green Goblin and gargoyles. Because he just looks like a big old green gargoyle, and I want to call him the Green Gargoyle instead of the Green Goblin, but I love it. I do love that. And it's just overall, it's just such a great film and such a great celebration of everything that is and has been Spider-Man and everything that will be Spider-Man going forward. I just loved every second of it. And yeah, I will be buying this when it comes out on Blu-ray, I think. I wish I had time to catch it a second time actually before we did this podcast, but yeah.
Same.
And I guess we can't leave off and close out without mentioning the Spider-Man 2099 bit at the very end.
Oh, that was glorious.
Yeah. That was really cool. Because he's like the one sort of version of Spider-Man like that you thought might have turned up in the film that didn't turn up in the film. And then like at the very end they sort of show his bit, but he ends up getting stuck in the Spider-Man cartoon series, like the old Spider-Man cartoon
I do
series.
like the juxtaposition of it, because it's like Spider-Man 2099, which, you know, apart from like going way, way deep into the lore and thinking about things that happen afterwards, it's like, that's kind of like the last version of Spider-Man time-wise. Yeah. And then he goes back to like the first screen version of Spider-Man that people would remember, the 67 cartoon.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he's like literally says, "Where are you going to go, Miguel? Back to the beginning."
And it's really cool how it's done as well, because you have like his AI assistant, is it Lila? I can't remember her name, but like she's like glitching around, and she kind of looks like Robot Chicken-esque, like claymation. And she's zipping around, and she's dressed all like in white and with glasses and stuff. And then it's Oscar Isaac, isn't it? Who's Miguel? I believe in the movie, yeah. And then like as the camera's sort of moving towards as she's zipping around, and then he's there, and it's done so well that like in the both showings that I saw, there were applause when we started to get the Spider-Man pointy meme. But like it's definitely a crowd pleaser.
I love the fact that they use that meme format. It was so good.
Yeah, it was cool that they kind of like they got that meme in there and everything, and yeah, I just loved it, and I think that's the overall message of this podcast, that we really enjoyed this film.
Can I rattle off some character moments that we haven't discussed quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things right at the start of the film, when Miles' dad is talking to him in the police car, and he's trying to relate to him by being cynical, like mocking the coffee shop that's been opened up. I forgot what it's called, like Foam Party or something.
It's called Foam Party, yeah.
Later on gets destroyed, like halfway through the film. But like Miles accuses his dad of being old, like, because he's not like his uncle Aaron, who's like the cool guy, and we haven't talked about the Prowler Aaron reveal either. But,
no.
I love that the end of the film shows that what Miles really needs is for his dad to relate to him through love and not cynicism, which comes across really nicely, because he's like, "I love you, officer," and he's like, "Wait, what?" Like, while he's still dressed as Spider.
Yeah.
And in that same conversation at the start in the car, he's like, Miles claiming that to go to this prestigious school that he's been transferred to, because we see this scene of him like walking past his old school and all his old friends and going to this posh new school where he claims that he basically won the lottery, and his dad reacts quite strongly that, no, you earned your place at that school, and this is quite multi-layered, because like not only in a real world sense of, people having the worth of their positions questioned, in like ongoing affirmative action discussions, but also like contrasts nicely with him growing into his Spidey powers, because like the final thesis of the film, I think, because it's the final lines of the movie, is anyone can wear the mask. You can wear the mask. We didn't know this before, but we know this now. I love that those two conversations tie in really nicely with each other. I don't know if any of you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I was going to bring up a couple of bits before we close out, but that was going to be one of them, because I've got that. That's one note that has its own line of things that I put down after the movie. Was literally anyone can wear the mask, anyone, and it's so multi-layered, because everything that you said is things that I thought as well, but it also sort of on a meta level speaks to some of the backlash that Miles Morales got when he was introduced, when people were like, Peter Parker can be the only Spider-Man, I can't believe you've killed him, who is this new kid? And it's like, anyone can wear the mask, it's the message that's behind it, it's the stories that are told.
Yeah, definitely. And like, to go on to the, like, to just sort of like, briefly talk about the reveal of his uncle being the Prowler, I thought that was really nicely handled. And I like that, he's this like cool uncle character at the start of the film. Like, he goes to his uncle to get away from his dad. And like, his uncle's like, letting him spray paint walls and stuff like that. And, but I quite like that. And I like how they worked that in, like, again, from the actual, what I know about Miles Morales and how it all works in the comics, and this is like a cleaner version of it, kind of thing.
A
the
much
Prowler
cleaner
and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it's really layered, a lot of that stuff. And what I like about it, it's not like Aaron Davis. He could be there's so like weak ways to write that character as like the bad uncle type thing. He's kind of cool, but and who has their last minute thing. But instead, there's so much weaved into weaved into their stories and the characters. So like one of the themes throughout the movie is father figures, but instead of it being a daddy issues thing, which is what you'll often get with this, and I mean, kind of original Spider-Man deals with this because his parents were killed. And what's kind of like nice for me personally, is that, you're dealing with like a character who's Afro-Latino, but instead of like the tropes and stereotypes of like a missing father or whatever, and instead of like the original Spider-Man who doesn't have his parents, instead this character not only has his dad around and his mum around, but he also has an abundance of like father figure type characters, because you have like his uncle, and you also have like Peter as well. Basically both Spider-Mans, because the blonde Spider-Man for a short while. And all of that stuff is handled really well, because some of the stuff that really like impacted me is his relationship with his dad, Jefferson, and like the way the way they go back and forth, but in a non-cliche way. There's a lot of like silence, and it's like intended silence of like not returning calls and not answering messages, but then there's like accidental or like out of his control silence, like when he's in the room with the web on his mouth and his dad comes up, and like just that alone, like in this short amount of time they introduce us to these characters and they make us care about people's relationships. So like when Aaron is like shot by the Kingpin, like that is like boom, and that's the second father figure character who's been murdered in this movie by the Kingpin as well.
Yeah,
so it's like that is like a proper like like stab in there, and then you have his dying moments with Miles, and then you get after that, not even that long after, when his dad is there and finds him with the body and thinks he did it, and then Spider-Man Miles goes invisible, obviously, to end that scene. But then he's there with his brother, and connecting back to the scene where he's outside the room, and he's just like, because we know from their thing where they've been estranged, and he's like, you can feel that weighing of like, I can feel this like distance opening between us, and it's like you don't have all the time in the world to fix these things. Like you lose so much by just letting these things fester, and like distance like this, it's just. It's not going to work. And like, as you guys said, like that, the message there, like for me, it's really nice and emotive to see like a black dad tell his black son, like, I love you multiple times during the movie. And that just be like a solid thing running through the spine of the movie. I just thought yeah, stuff like that really got me. Because even like Kingpin's character has a father issue thing, because the reason his family are dead, and the point of the movie in the Super Collider is because his actions as a bad father husband drove his family to die, like led to the accident that killed them. So it's like, I think on these various vectors, like obviously Peter B. Parker not wanting to have kids, and then being like the mentors we spoke about before, like I think all of those themes just work hand in hand with each other to create this cohesive theme that just is like the veins that run through the movie. So I think all of that stuff, I don't know, it adds like a layer. I think a lot of criticisms you could have of these type of films, like animated films for like the family, is that they have these overarching themes, like families are good and look out for each other and recycle, whatever. But this one, it has those things, but it's also dealing on some deeper levels for each of these different characters, because there's just little weird moments of like pathos that happen during the movie, like, or like just fun, like noticing stuff that you generally you don't really get in movies like this. So like, when Miles is in the spider cave and he finds the suit that's got a cape, and he's like, hey, Peter, this one's got a cape. And then Peter looks at him and he has that sort of like, yeah, I guess you're right, kid. But then it shows, Gwen, and Gwen has this look of like she's noticing the bonding between them. And that's just such a tiny moment, but it just works so well to push forward the themes and, the real character moments in the story. And I just like, there's so many little moments of like during this movie. Like some are like quick lines said by characters as a joke or something that means so much more.
Yeah, a lot of it's like unwritten knowing of the characters. You can tell that they really understand the characters well, because like in the moment you just mentioned with the cape, and like the reason like Gwen can be smiling is like for multiple reasons. Because one, she's noticing the bond. Two, she has a different relationship to Peter than Miles did. Like there's all these different layerings. I think it's a credit to the writers because I think it shows a different level of understanding when you can not write something into the scene, but it expresses that they knew and cared about it just in the way that things interact. I want to go back to one quick point about the Prowler, because I had an amazing whiplash moment the first time I saw this movie, where like I think it's 10 minutes in between scenes, because like you get the reveal where Prowler takes off his mask, and you get this amazing, like, he delivers this line to Kingpin over the phone. He's like, "You know me, sir. I don't ever quit." And then there's like a beat, and then the music sting comes in, and that's really effective. It gets your like heart pounding, and Miles is running away from the situation. And then you have the fight in Aunt May's house, and then you get to the moment where Prowler catches Miles on the roof, and he's holding him by the neck, and Miles pulls his mask off, and you can see this flood of reaction happening on Aaron's face. And then you get this moment where he starts pulling Miles' mask back on while he still has his hand on his throat, and I was like, oh shit, is he pulling his mask on so he doesn't have to deal with the fact that he's about to kill his nephew? Yeah. But then he doesn't, he pulls it back, and then Kingpin shoots Aaron in the back. Like, I think that layering was just, it had me on the edge of my seat the entire time.
Mm. No, definitely.
That was a great moment, moments. Yeah.
Just wanted to bring up a little bit of, like, movie trivia type stuff. You know Donald Glover's character in Spider-Man Homecoming?
Yeah.
That's Aaron Davis.
Yeah. He even he mentions he has a nephew who lives in the area.
Yeah. And there's a deleted scene, at the, like a deleted post-credit scene where he's trying to get the keys, using keys to try and get the webbing off his hand.
Yeah.
And then he rings his nephew. Saying he's going to miss an event. So, also appearing in that scene is Herman Schultz, the Shocker. That's who he's selling stuff to.
Yeah.
Did any of you catch the Donald Glover reference in this movie, in Into the Spider-Verse?
Yes.
Because I think me and Leon talked about this the other day, but there's on one of the TV screens in Aaron's apartment is like the introduction, I think the intro to Community Season 2, where you see like all of the Spanish study group getting out of bed in the morning, and it's this one clip of Donald Glover waking up from bed wearing his Spider-Man pajamas. Like, you kind of get a brief flash of it in this movie. I thought that was one of my favourite references. In Aaron's apartment, which is apt, and for audience members who don't know, like as well, like part of the creation of Miles Morales by Bendis and Pichelli is that, and I guess the people like Axel Alonso at Marvel is part like the inauguration of Obama, but also the Donald for Spider-Man campaign in the run-up to The Amazing Spider-Man, the first movie, where he was campaigning to be able to get an audition for that role. And I think there was a quite a big like internet like groundswell with that. It's kind of nice to see it go full circle.
Yeah, that was cool.
Did anyone else have like favorite references throughout this movie apart from that one?
No? Well, there's just so many that hit home so well that it's hard to choose one.
It's difficult.
Yeah, because there's so many. Because there's like Easter egg stuff, which is awesome. There's all the like cool posters, like from Death Till Shawn, and like the Chance the Rapper with the 4 instead of the 3. Yeah. And there's even like just little things like with the flashbacks of Peter, and like a lot of it is from the Sam Raimi movies as well as some of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. Like just those little bits, and like having a very knowing eye to like the dance which everyone hates and stuff like that. Like there's loads of little things like that. The 42 numbering everywhere.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite things.
Like it's hard to pinpoint one because there's so many good, and there's so many that I've missed as well that I definitely I've not seen.
Yeah, I'm sure there are, because it's a movie ripe for having loads of background detail.
Has anybody?
No, I'm just going to say another thing which doesn't fall into like the Easter egg one, but like just the sort of like it being Brooklyn, and when we're first introduced to Aaron Davis, like as Miles is running from the Visions Academy there, and they play like Biggie Hypnotize, and it just fits so much.
Yeah. So, has anybody got anything else left to say?
Yes.
I'm glad you said it first.
I'll just say, I'll run through a few things like I did on Sabrina. I thought this movie handled out of the city stuff better than Homecoming, because listeners might not know, but one of my criticisms of Homecoming is that I know part of the film, the point of it was to be different and get Peter out of New York. But part of that really annoyed me because, like, for me, the web slinging is a big part of it, and we don't really get like big web slinging scenes with Peter in that film. Whereas in this movie, they go out to Alchemax and they take a bus there. But like, because it's a forest and there's trees outside, we still get like really intense web sling to the level of Peter teaching Miles how to web sling. So I really love that. Like we mentioned before, the upside down shot of Miles falling up into Manhattan. I've loved that since the first trailer, but it still worked on me both times seeing it in the movie. And it's not just because of like the music that's playing and the swell or the time it is, and we get that quick montage of him making the suit and Aunt May and everything. But it's also the framing of it. I mean, it's a beautifully rendered scene, but it's him rising up as he descends into the city that he is going to protect. Like, there's just so many things, so many levels for me of like all of that falling into place, I just love it. There's many moments, in this movie that, threaten to destroy me. And like, Jefferson talking to Miles through the door is, that gets me, and just like the Stan Lee cameo that, especially now, that got me, the quotes at the end of the movie and shout out to Stanley and Ditko at the end, like, that got me. But like, one of the scenes that most got me is watching everybody in New York look at their phones and find out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man and has died.
Oh, man.
Just talking about that now messes me up in a big way. Like, it's, like, part of that, so like, this is a deep cut to Buffy, and it's not quite as dramatic, but in Buffy, at the end of season 3, as the character's about to transition from high school to college, one of the conceits of the show is that there's like demons and vampires running around the city, and people don't really notice. And they have a scene where it's like homecoming or something, or prom, and they give her, the school, like her classmate, they give her an award at prom or whatever.
It's a class protector.
Yeah, class protector. And in that moment, it's like, oh, not only are we all aware that Sunnydale is weird and has demons and stuff like that, it's like, we know you've been there saving us this whole time. And like that, stuff like that where you sort of pull that thing into the focus gets you. And in that moment where everyone's noticing that Peter Parker died, it's like, yeah, this is a Peter Parker I've known for 5 minutes, Chris Pine, Peter Parker, but also it's a Peter Parker I've known my whole life and he's been around for decades. And it's so brutal, and leading up to like the church scene, and it's so brutal.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's it. Does that wrap us up?
I have a favourite line. He took a bagel, and then somebody throws a bagel, and there's a little tiny bagel impact sound.
Yeah.
Yes. And also,
That's
it's comics. This whole film is Comics Code approved.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get that in there. Yeah.
Oh, Aunt May's sofas are covered in plastic. That's
Yes.
Oh, yes. Also, that is part of an amazing sequence as like the place has been destroyed around her and she's sort of looking at it Brady Bunch style, looking at the different boxes and like takes a baseball bat to a tombstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Take it outside.
So, I guess that wraps us up for Spider-Verse. And I guess we should probably rattle through our pull lists. Shouldn't we, Ray?
Can do. Yeah, go ahead.
Yep. So, this is going to be the pull lists for the things coming out up into the new year. So, because after this episode, it's Christmas, and then we're going into New Year, we're going to 2019, and we're going to be, we're going to run through a couple of things that are coming out for the end of this year, and then there's a few things to look forward to from 2019, from the first comic day of 2019. So for me, I've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 89, which is going to be a Christmas-themed one, which comes out on the 19th of December. American Carnage number 2 is on the 19th of December. Season's Beatings, which is a Marvel Christmas special, comes out on the 19th of December, so that's going to be kind of cool. And there's we reviewed a Klaus comic last time, didn't we? Last Christmas. But Klaus and the Crying Snowman is coming out on the 19th of December as well, which is going to be a seasonal comic, similar to the Klaus comic that we, or sort of like a continuation of the Klaus story, if you like. A Klaus, the Klaus Boom comic that we read last year. Into, Ray, what have you got for the 19th?
I've only got comics for the 19th, so there's actually a Firefly issue number 2 coming out on the 19th. I didn't realize there was a new run of Firefly, as in the Joss Whedon Serenity Firefly by Boom Studios, and it's written by Greg Pak, who I really like from Met Cadet U, so I'm going to be picking up 1 and 2 of that. Life is Strange number 2 is coming out on the 19th. These Savage Shores number 3, and also the Multiple Man trade paperback. I think we discussed the ongoing series at some point in the past, and that's coming out in book form. So.
Surprise, it's done now, there's 5 of them. So yeah, into the new year, so 2nd of January, which is like the first new comic book day of the new year. The 2 things I picked out were Wolverine the Long Night number 1, which looks to be the beginning of a new Wolverine miniseries. And we also have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2020. So this is like 20 years into the future. So it's like the current Turtles room, but 20 years into the future. The Utrom Civil War rages across Earth. The Utrom are the race that Krang belongs to. And there's a backup Technodrome, threatens hundreds of millions of innocent lives, and it's up to the Turtles to do what they do best and save the world. And it's to celebrate 20 years of IDW with the Turtles. So I'm looking forward to that. And this Wolverine book, it's a Wolverine miniseries where he's in Alaska, and it just looks very grizzled and very, very grim, very, very Wolverine, with the harsh weather conditions and everything else, you know. So yeah, that looks pretty cool. Anybody else got anything they want to tell us that's coming out or coming up?
Did you have anything, Leon, before I dive into a couple of little bits and bobs?
No, I've still got comics to discuss that I've read on the episode that I missed, so go ahead.
Okay, well, the first things that I will talk about is recommendations based on what I've read, which would be Spider-Man Noir, the Miles Morales Ultimate Comic Spider-Man run, and the Spider-Verse trade paperback. Definitely recommend reading Spider-Man Noir. It's a brilliant book. If I remember correctly, it's 5 parts, 5-issue run, so not too long. And it's just so beautifully done, because it's obviously being a noir story. It's got a sort of a gritty atmosphere, 1930s crime aesthetic. It kind of, the city feels like Gotham a lot of the time. The story starts you off in media res and then sort of, takes you back through how you got there. And the way that they've reimagined the characters is wonderful. Aunt May is sort of a socialist campaigner for sort of social justice and sort of the rights of the people. Felicia Hardy, she runs a speakeasy that's called the Black Cat. Norman Osborn is a crime boss that everyone calls the Goblin. It's just brilliant what they've done with the characters, and I really love the story. And I would obviously recommend the Miles Morales Ultimate Comic Spider-Man run as well. Brilliant run, very, very colourful, rich colours. It feels like it's a storyboard. It feels like you're watching a cartoon or watching a movie. And there's lots of little touches in the comic that I'm glad that they got into the movie as well. So things like when Miles gets his powers into the Spider-Verse, and his thoughts come up on screen as sort of thought bubbles. That's from the comic, because I think the first issue or so before he gets bitten by the spider, everything's done through speech, so you have normal speech bubbles. But then the second that he wakes up after being bitten by the spider and having his changes, he starts having internal monologue, and he's kind of wondering why his thoughts are sort of rejiggered, and it's almost like a little meta nod to like, you're a comic book character now. It does a lot of things really, really well.
Yeah.
The one that I would recommend the least, but still recommend, would be Spider-Verse. It's a big book, and it gets real silly sometimes, but it has to be that silly to get that many spider people into the book. And it's everyone, you've got Jessica Drew, you've got Ben Reilly, you've got Kane Parker, you've got, Penny Parker, you've got just everyone. You've got Spider-Man India, who is a really interesting character. You've got like the Japanese contingent, so you've got like the 70s Japanese Spider-Man program. He's there with his Super Sentai robot Leopardin. Brilliant stuff. So I'd recommend all of those, but again, Spider-Man Noir would probably be my top recommendation. And
Awesome.
then there's books that I would recommend as well, which I've been dying to talk about from catching up with the podcast. The main one, is a book called Futuristic Violence and Fancy Suits, written by, an author named David Wong. And it relates to a phrase that Leon has used multiple times when talking about things like Number One with a Bullet and Crowded, technology 10 minutes into the future. So I know when you guys were talking about the technology with the contact lenses that are sort of almost like wired to the internet and used for surveillance, and that it's, Sony's got a patent and it could be a real thing very soon. They have a similar thing where there's like a more successful version of Google Glass where everyone's got these like big gold hipster glasses, the kind of old 80s style glasses, but they've come back into fashion. But every one of them has like this little blue light in the corner that tells you it's recording. And everything's uploaded so that everyone's live streaming all the time. And the way that news works in that universe is that it automatically just kind of tunes in to what is the most talked about thing. So, like, the basis of the story, I'm not going to go into a huge long thing, but it's this woman named Zoe who owns a cat that she calls Stench Machine because it never stops smelling. She lives a really normal life. She's got a self-driving car and she lives in this futuristic world, but she has takeaway. She never washes her dishes, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden she's swept into this, like, whirlwind adventure where these guys in these really, really, fancy suits, are all sort of trying to get to her because her dad, who she's estranged from, was like this multi-millionaire. He could or could not have been part of a massive crime syndicate, and he's died recently and left everything to her, basically. And the way to get into his vault is somehow tied to her. So there's all these like bounty hunters after her. There's people from his company, the suit wearers that are trying to protect her. And it's just this whirlwind adventure, but it's just really, really well done in terms of that sort of theme of technology that could possibly exist tomorrow. I really, really enjoy the book.
Nice.
I can't talk about books without plugging a book that was written by a friend of ours, a book called Lunaria, by our good friend Matt Clark. You can find him as M.A. Clark on Amazon for Kindle, Amazon for the actual hard copy of the book. Brilliant little story, wonderful fantasy adventure. I won't go too much into it, but it's not a long book. It's a very, very good read. So those would be my recommendations, I'd say.
Cool. And I think that closes us out for this epically long episode. So, you can find us on Twitter under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Facebook under Ace Comicals. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Castro. If you want to listen to us, you can find me on Twitter under @Bato. Ray, where can we find you?
On Twitter @Monkeh, so that's MOONKEH.
Leon, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter @Leon Everett.
And Marv, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Marvyn Lafayette, but I don't post on Twitter very often, so you'd probably be better looking for me on Instagram, where I am Marv Lafayette 84. Cool.
And you can get in touch with us via Twitter, either in DMs. If you ask us a question, we'll answer it. You can also get in touch with us via the Ace Comicals email address, which is acecomicals@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram under Ace Comicals as well. That has been Ace Comicals episode number 51. That is Ace Comicals, over and out.